This video is a compilation of the entire 5th season of Obscure DOS Games series. Enjoy! Power Dolls, so Power Detachment of Limited Line Service, is a hex grid turn-based tactical strategy. It takes place in the year 2535, so far away in the future, on the planet Omni that has declared the independence from Earth. Naturally, as history has shown us, people are not keen on parts of the Empire's, remote or not, seeking individual existence outside of its governing forces. So, Terran armies are sent out to Omni to reclaim it. You play as a mastermind behind the defensive efforts, and you have access to a whole squadron of teachable Power Dolls, which they happen to be them exactly both, in person and as an acronym. So, it's an all-female military group piloting giant mechanized battlesuits against Earth invaders. The game is composed out of 9 missions of various objectives, ranging from destroying convoys through stalling enemy forces' advances, all the way to rescuing of captured military personnel. There are 21 different female pilots of various stats and specializations, 7 mech battlesuits fitting different combat purposes, 4 types of aircraft, artillery and 16 kinds of weapons. So a lot. The gameplay is kinda similar to tabletop battletech, with each turn representing 5 minutes of in-game time. Missions overall can take several in-game hours to complete and reward progression and pilot graphics upon completion. Each action, be it movement, attack or anything else, takes a certain portion of action points to perform, and your pull of this per unit is dependent on the pilot and the suit that she's in. Generally speaking, combat, given the presentation, is surprisingly strategic, splitting battles into phases. So, for instance, deployed air support may take time to reach the gameplay area when requested, and they don't appear instantly as if they were teleported. Even more so, both fighters and bombers can only stay in the air for a few hours before having to return to base to refuel, so they're never really a backbone of your tactics, but rather a support unit that you hope can complete their attacks successfully before needing to come back to the base. And that's not easy either, as the enemy keeps moving, so instead of aiming at them, you should aim where you expect them to move to. Despite its presentation, Power Dolls is a rather deep and intricate title that will no doubt provide a lot of fun for all fans of tactical wargames. Nitro Racers is a game lost to time. Well, it's also a top-down arcade racer, but it's much less dramatic sounding, so let's agree that most of all, it's a game lost to time. Yes. It was developed around late 1996, demo version was sent out to various gaming mags then too, and it also had a limited short-time release in 1997, soon after which it disappeared for 26 years, just to have a re-release on GOG and Steam in 2022. In other words, if you haven't purchased it around its short window of release in 1997, or had a pirated, found in a bag of loot copy, you couldn't have sampled its gameplay in nearly 30 years. And it's a pity, as it's a pretty fun little racer. It features 30 unique circuits set on different surfaces, so anything from ice through mud all the way to the asphalt. The cars you race in can get damaged, so will have to be fixed occasionally, but most of all, they're upgradable, so money earned while playing can be invested in having them bettered. You can play in 2 separate modes, action and simulation, and both can be utilized in a whole season championship in 2 different views. One showing a whole track at once, and a close-up for more intimate to the action arcade feeling. But enough about the features, after all what you really wanna hear about is gameplay. And I gotta tell you, it's pretty darn good. The cars are fast and nimble, the controls are tight, and navigating those corners, pushing opponents around and off the track is really fun. Sure, it may not be the best racer out there, but it's good enough to easily warrant a complete playthrough even today. So, if you feel the need for speed and get weirdly aroused by the smell of gasoline, Nitro Racers is definitely one to check out. Necromantics aka Magician's Castle is a unique and fun action-adventure platformer, with an emphasis on the non-platforming parts of it. And it's an 8-bit feeling game despite its very modern, very colorful presentation. It takes place in an old and mysterious castle in which various odd magical things seem to take place. Flying candles, hovering platforms, walls of fire, typical haunted magic castle stuff. You play as an invisible, bodiless magician wearing high hat, shoes and gloves, and are armed with nothing. No, really, you've nothing to attack or defend yourself with. And you know why? Because you're not a mage, you're a magician. Oh my god, I promise you that one of those days in the far off future one of my stupid jokes will eventually land. You can count on it. Not today though. Anyway, you must navigate series of rooms, avoiding various enemies like spiders, flying swords and the likes, and environmental dangers too. And since we're on the subject of environments, there's quite a lot of environmental puzzling in Necromantics. You'll need to locate and switch levers, search for diamonds and magic juices, and all these will influence the castle rooms and what's in them in different ways, often opening new passages or allowing you to progress further. So, why are in the castle anyway, you may wonder? Well, once upon a time, two brothers, coincidentally both being powerful magicians, so strong in their arms and not the arts, as while mages have true power, magicians have sleight of hand and distraction, and one of them accidentally erased the body of another. How did he do it having no powers at all? We will never know, as the intro never bothers to explain. Well, truth be told, it kinda assumes use of real powers, but you and I know better, right? And we know that magicians thrive on rabbits taken out of hats, cards sticking out of sleeves, and various different tricks usually involving large boxes and sharp saws. They don't dabble in the mystical arts whatsoever. Still, you're said bodiless magician and you have to traverse the castle to recover it. Necromantics is a simple in its design game, but a pretty fun fare for a single playthrough despite that. Lost Vikings 2 North by Northwest is a much less known game than its predecessor was on PC. So that we're clear that I'm not talking about consoles, as it did quite well there. And for the most part, same as the original, it's a puzzle platformer. Identically to the first game, our trio of protagonists have to get home, going through dozens of enemies filled puzzle-locked of platforming levels, utilizing their skills to solve the levels and progress further. This time, however, Eric the Swift, Olaf the Stout and Balog the Fierce are joined by two new heroes, Fang the Werewolf and Scourge the Dragon. Odd additions, but whatever, such is the case of sequels made by different developers. 3 out of 5 of these are predetermined for each level and are chosen in a way that would require all of their skills to contribute to solving said stage. To complete the level you need to find and collect 3 required items and deliver all your Vikings, well, and slash or creatures to the exit. If any of the characters dies, the level is unwinnable and will require a restart. That said, you have to do it manually, as the game allows you to keep going even if you can't complete the level anymore, so that you could familiarize yourself with the layouts, puzzles and better prepare for the second attempt. Generally speaking, the levels are nearly as well designed as in original and can get as tough, if not tougher too. So if you're someone who's fast to quit, it may not necessarily be a game for you. On the flip side, figuring out those more complicated stages feels really rewarding, so if not for anything else, it can be worth persevering just for that. Now, I'll tell you what I don't like about the game, as there is one thing actually, and it's the graphics. I feel that first outing's pixel presentation aged way better than the pre-rendered Donkey Kong Country-like looks of the second. Some like it, I don't. Today that is, but wasn't a big fan of it back then either. Nova 9 is a sequel to earlier Stellar 7 and oh my days, it has a whole lot of plot for a glorified tad modernized battle zone. But let me try to bring you up to speed. So, the villain of the first game, Gear Draxon, whose name sounds like an exotic disease you get from visiting unlicensed massage parlor, survived the events of that title and crash landed on an alien planet. He found a mysterious, powerful artifact there that allowed him to mind control others. With its help, he aims to rebuild his interstellar empire of evil, and that would be an awesome name for a follow-up to Star Wars' original trilogy. Anyway, you, playing as a universal badass Captain John Alex, a cousin of Commander Peter Thomas, who in turn is a friend of General Bruce William, that knows no other than Admiral Michael Andrew. Jump into your brand new Raven 2 tank and we'll have to go through 9 thematically different star systems, defeating various aliens and their crafts until you finally end up facing your Draxon himself in his super tank. All planets are rather flat, with some sporadic rock or flora formations here and there, and are not very well designed. Early 3D tech may have been the limiting factor here, but I'm just saying. You can collect and carry up to 9 power-ups, that then can be used by you whenever you feel like it, and have a double-shot cannon with unlimited ammo at your disposal. Every now and then, on each planet, you'll find a warp allowing you to transport back and forth between it and your base, so you'll be able to jump back to repair or upgrade your tank when needed. Damage can cause your tank to have some of its slots for upgrades taken out of commission and your movement and turning capabilities reduced considerably, so it's best to try to keep it under control and not get out of hand. Nova 9 is a very decent first-person perspective vehicular shooter that I completely don't care about, and while I can objectively appreciate it for what it is, I never really liked it. Nova Storm is a sci-fi FMV on-rail shooter, and it's a pretty decent, even if not exceptional one. Kinda like I am at my work. I'm a jack of all trades and master of none, mainly because I don't wanna be there and do what I do, but that's beside the point. Same here. Nova Storm is pretty good at many things, but overall does not rise to become something more than many other FMV shooters on the market were at the time. And by 1994, there were quite a few to pick between. The story sees humanity leaving Earth in huge arc ships in a distant future, seeking new planet to settle on. They are however relying on AI for everything, as we will soon too, cause we're so lazy. And since the interstellar trip takes way longer than previously anticipated, AI manages to evolve over time and decides to wipe the humanity out. Why? Because why not? I mean, Skynet came to this same conclusion and countless other movie and book-inspired AIs did too. It must be a logical choice. I mean, we would destroy ourselves if AI wouldn't do it anyway, so what's the difference? Well, the difference is we don't want someone else to do it. We want it to happen slowly, systematically, by destroying nature and everything around, especially all that sustains our lives, and not for it to happen in one sweep move. If anyone's gonna bring doom to humanity, it better sure as hell be ourselves. So, not to let any silly AIs do it, we've sent our so-called Scavenger Force Squadron, in which our top pilot is no other than you. Our bright star, savior and hero extraordinaire all rolled into one. And you will have to fight your way through 4 large differently themed levels, each ending with a boss fight. As you go about it, you collect bronze, silver and gold power-up tokens that fill in the power-up meter, and when you're at the level that you'd like to acquire a corresponding to it power-up, you just gotta select it. And bada beep bada boom, it's there pew pew pewing left and right, causing more damage and destruction than before. As on-rail shooters go, Nova Storm is not that bad. It actually includes hooks in the video feed, so that if you fly into something that's clearly an obstacle in the video while not destroying you straight up, or even stopping you in your tracks really, it will actually damage your ship. It's something that most earlier games in the genre did not do. If you like those kinds of explosive experiences, there's a lot here to enjoy. Especially that Nova Storm is not overly difficult. But if all that sounded boring to you, playing the game is not something that will sway your opinion in any way. Offensive is an offensive attack. Not that there's any other kind, but it is on my gaming sensibilities. Why? Because it sucks. Oh, I seem to be getting ahead of myself, so let's start at the beginning. Offensive is a real-time top-down isometric action wargame. It takes place during World War II and places you in the middle of action. You can place either Axis or Allied side in a campaign spanning through 20 missions, all the way from Normandy to capture of Berlin. And from the presentation point of view, it looks quite okay. The terrain is varied and interesting, and units are fun to watch in action, even if they're rather clunky animated and the interface is easy to grasp and ergonomic. Sadly, that's where the positives end. The gameplay is not very fun and feels a little like cannon fodder if cannon fodder would be devoured of all fun, fluidity and spirit. While there are 15 types of units available, from infantry through armored trucks all the way to the tanks, offensive feels lacking. Combat looks like units flailing at each other in a jumbled mess until one of them explodes. Yes, explodes in a fiery blaze. And overall, it seems like the game is set up in a way that it's easier to win at combat the less you actually try to do so. So, if you charge at the enemy, try to approach them tactically, flank them and such, you'll do worse than just standing there at the mission start and waiting for the opponents to come at you. I mean, it may just be me misremembering things, but I feel that I'm not that far off either way. Even if you would want to behave offensively, like the title suggests, then there's not that much to do. You can order your units to attack, hold area and retreat, with the last two not being usable at all as the game never really calls for that. So, if realistically speaking only attacking makes sense in offensive, you could theoretically play it similarly to cannon fodder, charging in and killing everything in your way. But you can't really. The gameplay is slow, units move as if they were going through a puddle of mud, and the map feels rather empty. I can't recommend Offensive to anyone, as it's not a great title, but if you're interested in it from a purely historical point of view, then check it out. Other than that, it's definitely one to skip. The year is 2045, and a terrorist group conquers one of the islands on the Pacific Ocean. Soon after, they declared it an independent state and began spreading chaos and destruction from there, treating it as their base of operations. Because the whole world is shaken and, frankly speaking, afraid of them, and their unpredictable and dangerous behavior, it is decided that they need to be eradicated, by any means necessary. So a mercenary group, oddly named Panic Soldiers, is sent to the island to drive the terrorists away. Now, I don't have to tell you who's in charge of it all, right? It's you again. I mean, who else would save us? Panic Soldier is a tactical real-time strategy that completely omits the aspect of base building and focuses on combat and individual pilots only. In fact, it's so laser focused on them that before each and every mission you pick robots, well, mechs really for your units, their armament and then said units. So pilots that will sit in the mechs and drive them to your unquestionable victory. And it's the combination of these mechs, pilots and their stats that will ultimately determine how well during the missions you'll do. Each of the pilots has their own unique stats of defense, attack and accuracy, and after successful missions they earn experience points and increase their attributes. Fulfilling mission objectives in turn rewards you money, for which you can buy new robots or upgrade the ones that you already have. The focus on singular units rather than the whole armies makes Panic Soldier kinda feel like cannon fodder. And yes, I know I said the similar thing about our previous game Offensive, but where it failed, so gameplay and fun factor, Panic Soldier does not, and offers very decent and enjoyable loop, even if it's not exceptional in any real way. In short, Panic Soldier is well put and enjoyable for a single playthrough real-time strategy / squad tactics mixture that may not have been worth a whole price upon its release, but is more than worth your time today. At a discount price it can be purchased at or even downloaded for free off the internet. If I would have told you that PNGG Special is a sequel to PNGG, then I wouldn't have told you anything, at least nothing useful. Why? Because neither of the titles were popular or widespread in the West when they originally released. They are Korean cartoon-like side-V brawlers / beat-em-ups. You play as either of the titular protagonists, so either unfortunately named P or not as unfortunate but still odd Gitty, and control these anthropomorphic animals, defeating any and all enemies that you come across. And these enemies, for the most part, are either animals or anything it seems that came to the dev's mind, to the point that it looks as if they were sitting at the table brainstorming and not throwing any ideas away at all, just gathering them up and adding to the same pile that eventually ended up in a game. So while you will fight eagles and crocodiles, so thematically thinking animals among others, you'll also face stone elementals big and small, cakes, crackers or robots, not to mention a whole slew of other oddities. And yes, when I say cakes and crackers, I mean those you would have normally devoured at home. All these, same as our duo, have their own regular and special moves and are rather nicely looking and animated. Generally speaking, PNGG Special is a pretty fun, even if not great side-scrolling brawler that's as fun played alone as it is with a friend. Naturally, in a standard for the genre manner, you'll get to find and pick up various health refilling items along the way, and most levels end with a boss fight. While PNGG Special may lack the staying power of giants of the genre like Final Fight or Cadillacs and Dinosaurs for instance, for a rather obscure game, it's a gem and one worth checking out. Sounds and graphics, as with most games coming from Korea in the mid-90s, are pretty darn good and arcade-like in their quality. So if you like beat-em-ups, this one's worth a look, especially that it has that arcade Asterix and Obelix brawler type of a vibe, going for comedic and fun rather than serious gameplay. If you ever had a Nokia phone in the 90s, this one requires no introduction. Pizza Worm is your classic Snake game, but modified. And it's as simple and arcade at its heart idea as they come. You play as a worm and you, well, eat pizzas. I mean, who doesn't like pizza, right? And every time you do, you grow, and by grow I mean that your tail gets longer. And you have to eat as many of these pizzas amassing points as it's possible without ever crashing into your own tail or the walls. And the bigger the pizza eaten, the longer your worm will get. It may sound odd, incredibly basic and boring now in 2024, but trust me, this one's a gameplay bullseye. If like arcade games, that is. It's fast, action-packed and has as tight controls as most games don't even today. Oh, and the best thing is, it's not restricted to 2-axis only like the Nokia original was, but you can turn smoothly at any degree angle. Make no mistake, however, Pizza Worm is not a walk in the park. Far from it. It's fast, it's chaotic, your worm grows fast and incredibly long, and before you realize, you're forming intricate designs trying to pack your length into the little space you have left on the screen to try to work your way to that next cheesy tomato sauce-filled Italian treat. Oh, and did I mention that it can be played in simultaneous 2-player mode? Yep, and it's even more fun, crazy and difficult then. Pizza Worm was a freeware release, and as such, at the price of exactly $0.00, its fun-to-price ratio is over the roof, and way higher than that of any other game in today's video. Project Paradise is a top-down action-adventure game similar to Take No Prisoners that we've spoke about in one of the recent 10 years of early Windows gaming videos, with a difference that you're not only in control of a single protagonist, but a trio of them, and you have to utilize all of their skills to complete the omnipresent puzzles and finish the game. Story-wise, in the distant dark future, the world is controlled by a single entity. The governments are irrelevant or non-existent, and everything is ruled by the powerful syndicate. One that uses both technology and dark magic for its nefarious purposes, effectively tumbling the humanity in fear and chaos. Worst of all, a super-secret project of theirs codenamed Paradise is to have the power to destroy the entire planet and wipe all living creatures. Naturally, whenever there's something that's beyond the capabilities of the army or special forces units, a crack commando unit that was previously sent to prison by a military court for a crime they didn't commit is required. These men promptly escaped from a maximum security stockade to the Los Angeles underground. Today, still wanted by the Syndicate, they survive as soldiers of fortune. If you have a problem, if no one else can help, and if you can find them, maybe you can hire the A-Team. Oh shit, wrong script, sorry. I obviously meant that you're the one we sent out for when things go astray, and this time you lead a 3-man team to stop Project Paradise. Unlike the aforementioned Take No Prisoners, this game places as much emphasis on the puzzling as it does on the shooting. So while there's still a lot of action and plenty of weapons to pew 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 away through hordes of enemies, you'll have to use your noggin in it too. Presentation-wise, Project Paradise looks pretty good, the graphics are detailed and smoothly animated, and the rotation effect, while a bit sickness-inducing, is rather impressive. If cyberpunk and fantasy mixture in a shooter/adventure setting is something you'd like to try, there's no better start than here. Project Neptune has one of the most stupid and cliché stories you've heard. Well, I may be exaggerating, but it's definitely one of the most terrible you'll hear all day today. An evil organization, because each Bond-esque story has to have one, called Yellow Shadow and led by one and only, also very Bond-like named villain Ming, is secretly mining uranium in numerous hidden underwater bases. Their plan is as nefarious as their name isn't. They aimed to build an army of killer robots and take over the world. Now, as ambitious as it is, Ming's not going to succeed because you're here, and you're gonna stop him. Playing as Rip Steele, a bump like no other, and a proud owner of a coconut-sized cojones, which in itself poses series of issues when clothes shopping or whenever you get in a pool, as these two huge bad boys work like buoys of some sort. Still, you're you, and you're gonna deal with it. So, you jump in a single-person mini-sub that's armed to the teeth and head off to destroy the underwater bases. You do so by either starving them of energy, blowing links between them, or by bombing them plenty enough times to cause significant damage. Each base is connected to at least one other, and that's how you go about locating them, going at them one by one like in a series of links in the chain. You're naturally not just destroying the bases willy-nilly, as they are all protected by the Ming's evil henchmen that all have to be disposed of or distracted. The oxygen and energy in your sub runs out quite often, or well, is on the verge of running out quite often to be precise, so you'll have to make frequent trips to one of your allied bases to refill them. While graphically for an EGA title, Project Neptune does not look bad, mixing first-person submarine action with third-person diving sections, the gameplay is not very captivating, and after a while a feeling of repetition-induced boredom may settle in. If it looks or sounds interesting to you, check it out, but if it does not, it's definitely a game you won't lose anything skipping. Prophecy the Viking Child was originally designed as a two-parter, with second one planned for a release a year or so after the first. Well, what you plan for and what happens are not necessarily the same things, and the sequel never saw the light of day. Hard to tell why today, was it sales numbers not reaching profitable margin, parent company's bankruptcy or something else, but it stayed a singular game. So, effectively a half of the story. For the most part, Viking Child plays very similarly to Wonder Boy in Monsterland, so it's a mixture of platforming and role-playing in a fantasy setting. You play as a titular Norse kid, a prophesized hero who will save the world. You're born to do great things and become the medieval Neo, a hero to save everyone and defeat the Matrix. Well, one of these is not right and not true. Anyway, Evil got lucky, knowing very well of the foretold prophecy, kidnaps your friends and family to fuel the prophecy and cause chaos and destruction throughout the lands. Before you get to Loki and save your kin, you'll need to defeat his 8 apprentices of darkness. The game is composed out of 16 levels, taking places in various different beautiful but also dangerous locations, you know, villages, mountains and castles, all full of Loki's goons. Dotted around the game world are the shops, which will allow you to purchase weapons and other helpful items, like bombs and potions for instance. The VGA presentation is rather nice, but for whatever the reason falls short when compared to Amiga's outing. It's very brownish all throughout. Which is odd, as technically speaking VGA was much more capable card than early Amiga OCS and ECS chipsets were, but whatever, it is what it is. Gameplay, while not groundbreaking, is pretty fun too, and definitely a treat to all fans of action platformers, especially if they like a touch of RPG rolled into their games. Prophecy of the Shadow is SSI's post-AD&D role-playing and a very unusual game for them. While it gained rather favorable reviews in the max of the time, it never sold as well as their Gold Box series titles and eventually became a largely forgotten game. Prophecy of the Shadow looks and feels as if it was designed to be a genre-bait kind of a game. An easy entry into the world of role-playing for those who haven't played this and wanted to try something easier and friendlier first before attempting any of the cornerstones of the genre. So, a lot is simplified in Prophecy of the Shadow, not to overwhelm the player. The character creation and stats are very basic. In fact, there's only strength, magic and agility, and they are what you think that they're responsible for. The graphics, however, are on the forefront of everything and polished to the levels SSI wasn't known for yet. Heck, there are even cinematic cutscenes accompanying the story. And the whole interface and combat is mouse-driven and made as easily digestible to the RPG newies as possible. Evil shadow lords are on the verge of entering our world, and their arrival will come with death, chaos and destruction. If that wasn't enough, the magic is dying, and even if it wasn't, its use is prohibited and practitioners are haunted by the very efficient Cindercraft mage hunters. And worst of all, the protagonist you play as is blamed for death of his master, who's been stabbed with a poisoned dagger. In Prophecy of the Shadow, you're not leading a group of adventurers anymore, but a singular hero who alone has to defeat the evil and save the land. To do so, you can naturally resort to combat, which takes place on the same plane exploration does, and features no separate screens. It's not turn-based as most of SSI's games were either, but plays out entirely in real time. Use of magic requires you to learn spells from tomes found in the game and equipping of appropriate catalysts. While Prophecy of the Shadow may have not been the first, it was definitely one of the first games to use digitized from real-life characters, superimposed on pre-drawn backgrounds. At the time, it must have looked groundbreaking, but hardly any game ever is saved by the graphics if something else is wrong with it. And in case of Prophecy, while the attempt was noteworthy, very linear story and simplistic gameplay alienated versed fans of the genre, and Prophecy failed to gain any real traction. Protostar War on the Frontier is a space trading and exploration game that supposedly was meant to be Starflight-free, but due to some legal/copyright reasons wasn't possible and it ended up being Protostar. Not a cool name, I'm afraid. And as we know, games live or die by their names. So, as per usual in spacefaring games, evil alien race of Skeech is threatening the humanity and the peace in the galaxy overall. To respond to this newfound danger, a Protostar initiative is launched and aims to convince 4 other neighboring alien species to join humans in preparation for the upcoming attack. And the best agent the Earth had at its disposal is chosen. Yes, it's you again. I know that you may be tired by now, always being sent to put out fires everywhere, but think for a second about it. If not you, then who? I mean, Batman disappeared on me on Christmas, Master Chief is busy recording his new TV show, we don't have anyone else. At least not on the same or even comparable skill level. So, you will have to travel to the ends of the universe, trade to earn money, land on planets to gather precious minerals and alien creatures, upgrade your ship and hire crew members. All in anticipation of the worst that's definitely coming. Each of the crew members can be assigned to a particular station, so navigation, tactical, biotech, science and contact, and each of them requires a salary. And all that while fending off Skeech raiders, fighting off pirates, well, space pirates, and taking part in various events. It is, after all, a space-based semi-role-playing adventure game in some parts too. Protostar's presentation is rather nice, sporting beautiful 256-color graphics and a decent soundtrack, both well-fitting within its space-traveling theme. So it had to be a hit and earn a lot of money, right? Oh wait, we're in the Obscure Those Games video. What went wrong then? It's hard to tell, the gameplay was there, the idea was there, and the difficulty was at the right level too. Demanding, but not overly pushing, and Protostar looked rather good too. So maybe it's the length, as it was a fraction of the previous title? I feel that we may never know, but either way, it's definitely worth a look. Purple Saturn Day is a space-themed Olympic events game in the vein of titles like California Games or Decathlon, but sporting 4 unique and non-existent in real-world disciplines. First is a tronic slider test, where the goal is to the energy ball, shoot it with a laser and then collect pieces it leaves behind before your opponent will, and it's played for points. And there's the Ring Pursuit, which is a cross between a slalom race and a shooter, where you speedrun around Saturn's rings. In Time Jump, you have to jump as far as possible, and brace yourself here, into the future. So you have to fuel the gravity catapult first and then propel yourself through time like some kind of a deranged time-faring human cannonball. And finally, Brain Bowler, which coincidentally was later on released as a standalone title under the name of Ecstasy and is the only puzzle game within the 4. I've also covered it in an earlier video. It's played against the computer opponent and you have to toggle switches in the board to charge up all your chips, in the same time disrupting the opponent who does the same. All of these are very unique and something one does not expect from an Olympic Games style title, but also not bad for a playthrough or two from time to time. Personally, I was not a fan, even if the graphics were not bad for the time, as I preferred those standard discipline sport titles more. That's me though, so if you feel like trying something else out in the genre, Purple Saturn Day may be down your alley. Keep in mind, however, that it's a rather difficult title, so it's not something you'll master in a singular playthrough. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes we cover games that are, but really shouldn't be, for a variety of reasons. Partty Squad, a follow-up to Partty, is one of those games. It originally released on SNES in 1994 and 9 years later on the Amiga. Yes, you heard that right. It was released in 2013 on the Amiga, so a system that was virtually dead around 1994-1995. I mean, it still got games then, but Commodore went bankrupt and the hot potato of the IP that the Amiga was passed between a few major tech players of the time, most of them passing it by or bankrupting after trying to keep it running. Coincidence perhaps, but the fact remains. Still, Amiga's version was a full-fledged port of the game and the other of the two that actually released. DOS's version, however, is something entirely different. While it was being made and looked really decent, it was dropped mid-development for whatever the reason the devs might have. And the only copy that we currently have access to is the 4-level demo that was sent out to various gaming mags at the time. So, it's not a full release, but it's worth talking about nonetheless. Naturally, you play as the titular Partty, an amorphous blue blob that has to complete all the levels, collecting stars and seeking out exits. It can stretch left and right for attacks and upwards to propel itself up, helping with the jumps. Stars that you collect are used for unlocking of various extra skills and abilities for our hero. So for instance at 10 he gets a super punch, a better and stronger than the regular attack. All stages are naturally filled with different enemies in the form of pups. They throw grenades at you, shoot mortars, hit you and generally speaking do all kinds of shenanigans to make your life more difficult. Or faster fleeing, which is kinda odd as they were on your side in the first title. Anyway, why are you doing all that? Because yes, there is a story here, even if it's not a full game. Evil Wizard's henchmen invaded the Partty land and captured many of your brethren, which now you have to free traveling to the wizard city of Clad. Or you would, cause once again the game is not completed. Even though Partty Squad never officially released on PC, the demo's graphics are beautiful, clearly showing a promise of what could have been, and the gameplay is there too, and it's generally speaking worth a look and playthrough. Especially that it can be downloaded for free off the internet. When Quiver came out in 1997, it could run on the potatoest of 486 potatoes. Heck, it could probably run on a 386 too, though gaming on it would be at best questionable. Still, by 1997, 486 was an ancient architecture and most serious gamers had at least first generation Pentiums or their equivalents. So, Quiver, a sci-fi themed FPS, was a gift to those who didn't have time, money or capabilities to move to newer and faster platforms. While it was not comparable to Duke Nukem 3D or Quake, it could definitely stand next to Doom. Funny enough, it's ported a similarly simple and straight-to-the-point story of aliens attacking Earth with their overwhelming forces, and you playing a role of a badass superhero savior who will save the planet one alien corpse at a time, gradually mowing them down. The game's engine, however, sees some basic improvements over the one of Doom's, as you can jump, I know, crazy, and it even features some areas over another, which was impossible to achieve in the classics engine without use of some kind of advanced Jedi mind-coding fuckery. Yeah, I'm coining the term for the benefit of all the devs out there. You're welcome. Quiver features some of the most unique weapons you've seen in the FPS to date too. So other than the standard blasters and the likes, you have fireball shooters, weapons that spawn rings of fire upon impact, alien hands of various kind, each offering a different firing capabilities like devastating bursts of shots or jets of flame, or even Medusa sphere that bounces off enemies' shots directly at them. And that's not even all of them. Point is, there's a lot of interesting pew-pewers in Quiver, and if you're a fan of the genre, you will appreciate it. Enemies too are the oddest bunch out there, from what I can only describe as singular eyes on hairy spider legs through demon bees, which they're clearly not, but they do look kinda like it. All the way to the flying spaghettis and miniaturized Dune's sandworms. Now, I know that neither of the two are what I said exactly, but they do remind me of them and I found it to be the easiest way of describing them to you. Whatever, there are a few dozen of even weirder ones and they're all fun to look at and annihilate. Sometimes in the opposite order. Well, for your health's sake, most of the time. Gameplay-wise, 27 level strong campaign plays the exact same way early FPSs did. So you gotta collect something to complete the levels. In this particular case it's spheres of some sort, crushing any and all alien resistance on your way, and also finding keys for some obligatory environmental puzzling. You know, how you would in Doom. Two omissions, however, which in my eyes are a bit of a letdown, are the lack of end-level bosses and no multiplayer. But if you're in it for the thrill of the hunt of the invading scum, you've no doubt have a lot of fun in Quiver. Rama is a first-person perspective point-and-click adventure game that's a bit underappreciated, I think, and should have been much more popular. If not among the general's gamers populace, then at least within the point-and-clickers crowd. It plays for the most part kinda like Myst, but tells its own unique story based on Arthur C. Clarke's series of science fiction novels. The oh-so-exciting plot is as follows. 4 years earlier than when the game takes place, a gigantic cylindrical object appeared seemingly out of nowhere in our solar system and eventually in our skies, casting its menacing shadow on an unprepared Earth. Now, it's not something you know how to respond to, as no one expects that kind of a surprise given the currently known laws of physics and how fast, or more accurately slow, objects can travel in space. So, thankfully, for once we decided to respond peacefully and not by sending a bunch of nukes at it, at least initially. The International Space Agency named the object Rama, which I can only guess is an acronym for something, perhaps radically alien mysterious airship. Said agency assembled a team of explorers composed mainly of scientists and physicists too, dubbed it Newton Team, and sent it off to study the object. Upon arrival, it is discovered that Rama is an entirely hollow rotating cylinder that houses enormous alien cities populated by the alien species that the object itself somehow collected around the universe on its travels. So, it's a self-sustaining, self-operating zoo of sorts, if you will. And I could tell you here that you'll find myrmicats, avians, octospiders and biotes there, but by doing so, I'd tell you nothing, cause I suppose the names mean as much to you as they do to me. I should really read more, I think. Anyway, what I will tell you is that one of the members of the original team, Valery Borzov, died during mission in the mysterious circumstances, and you, playing as the nameless protagonist, are sent to replace him. When you get there, you'll need to investigate the mysterious death and also solve many different, often logic or math-based puzzles that are genuinely fun to work out. There will be quite a few twists and turns in your adventure as well, and the story will change its course dramatically more than once, keeping you on the edge of your seat all throughout its run. Well, play, really not run, but whatever. I said it already and I'm not retracting it. Rama's conclusion suggests a follow-up, but it was never released, and it was probably in part due to the rather poor sales of the game. I wasn't there though, I didn't witness it, so it's my best semi-educated guess and not a quote-unquote fact about it. If you like adventures, and especially Myst, Raven and the likes, Rama is something you'll appreciate. Average rabbit lives up to 12 years, and if you keep in mind that it's 7 times less than we do, you kinda began understanding why Quick the Thunder Rabbit is so, well, quick. But Sonic is so much faster and cooler and bluer, it has spiky hair and the attitude. Well, yes, my dear Watson, you're correct, but hedgehogs live 2-3 years tops on average, so he's gotta pack as much experiences in this short time as possible. Anyway, coming back to Quick, it's an always scrolling action platformer spanning 4 worlds, jam-packed with various enemies and offering different routes for exploration and progress. Now, while all the enemies are rather cute designed and friendly looking, don't be fooled. They're all jealous of Quick's speed and pace he goes through the levels at. So, they will try to stop him by any means necessary. Our hero, however, is not your everyday rabbit, but Quick, the Thunder Rabbit. I sure hope I added some kind of a cool and loud lightning strike effect here in the post. If not, then just imagine that I did, for the sake of both of us. So, Quick disposes of the enemies spinning straight into them and then picks up whatever's left. You know, how robbers do. I mean rabbits, how rabbits do. And it can be either a power-up in the form of a red or green potion, allowing him to jump higher or run faster, one would say at thunder-like speeds, hearts that keep his energy up, or carrots and water, which, believe it or not, sustain him, as Quick the Thunder Rabbit is also one of the first ever survival roguelikes out there, and you have to eat and drink to survive. It's not a roguelike really, I got carried away, but the rest is spot on. You can bank on it. Each level has an objective, they are usually not very difficult, but the variety definitely makes them more interesting. Some may require you to get to the exit ASAP, while others have you seeking clocks, to remind Quick of the passing time and how little of it he has left on this blue marble we call Earth. Jesus, that's triple D, deep, dark and disturbing. One way or another, all levels end with a boss fight that first requires you to navigate a sort of labyrinth-like tunnel section to get to them. Bosses themselves are rather unique, like a guitar-rocking fox that keeps dropping sick riffs as his attacks and will require figuring out their attack patterns to beat. Overall, Quick the Thunder Rabbit, while not being the best platformer out there, it's definitely worth a playthrough as it's fun all throughout, and fans of the genre will no doubt appreciate its unusual gameplay, even if Quick's jumps feel a bit floaty. Or is it just me and I shouldn't have mentioned it cause no one else finds them to be like it? I suppose it's one of those mysteries of the universe that we'll never learn the answer to. Ravage is a pretty fun sharer sci-fi vertically scrolling shooter. If you played Raptor or Tyrion, you'll feel right at home playing Ravage. Story-wise, cause naturally the devs decided that one was needed, you're not gonna believe it, but you're engaged to the most beautiful girl out there. Yup, not the second or third, the most beautiful one. On the other hand, you're you, so a hero, a savior, a superstar too, all rolled into one, so who else would get the best girl? Anyway, your wedding, cause things were moving quite fast, was supposed to take place in a month, but as usual in situations like this, when something's supposed to go well, something else happens and things take another entirely different path. So, horned evil master of the darkness is going by the name of Toran, kidnapped your beloved and you've no choice than to jump in your jet, track him down and save her. Usually I would have said not necessarily in that order, but in this particular case the order has to stand for it all to make sense. Now, all of it wouldn't be that odd really if you were fighting demon/hell enemies, since he's a master of darkness after all. But all the way through the game, you're facing nothing more than the regular ships of various kinds, ground installation, trains and the likes. There's nothing demonic about them. So, the aforementioned unnecessary story is additionally also unfitting one, at least as compared to the gameplay loop. Whatever. As you go through the game spreading death and destruction everywhere as one does, you are rewarded credits at an end level, based on your performance throughout it. And you can spend them later on to either purchase new weapons, upgrade the ones that you have already, or buy extra lives. What is best about Ravage, however, is that it's actually, despite being a shareware release, a very competent and fun game. I mean, sure, Tyrion or Raptor it is not, but it's so close. I mean, you can easily replay it a few times in a row and still have fun. It's that good. Better yet, grab a friend and play it in co-op, it's even better that way. Despite not being unique in any of its parts, Ravage is fun and definitely worth more attention than it ever received. Reach for the Stars Conquest of the Galaxy is one of the earliest examples of 4X games. What is 4X, you may wonder? Well, it's one of the two. Either extra extreme exciting experience, or explore, expand, exploit and exterminate. Both sound as plausible to me. Anyway, what is Reach for the Stars? It's a huge sci-fi themed and space-based strategy game that will see you discovering and exploring unknown galaxies, colonizing planets, meeting alien civilizations, expanding your spaceship fleet, and engaging in conflicts when necessary. Or when you feel like it, cause wars weren't always born out of necessity, sometimes it's out of will, greed, prejudice, hate, or because of a misunderstanding/mistake. Often, combination of few of these. Each planet that you colonize can be set up differently, allocating your available resources between defense, research, development, environmental and social factors, industry, and even happiness of your citizens. There's a lot to micromanage on them is what I'm saying. Like, surprisingly a lot for when the game came out. In fact, the variety of options in micro and macro management is an overarching theme of the game, and its strongest suit really. Well, next to flexibility only. In fact, flexibility is not the best word for it, freedom of choice is better and more suiting, I think. Because you can play Reach for the Stars any way you want. There's always 4 players in each game, be it human or CPU controlled, and you're not limited to playing it one way only. You can play militarily, funny enough even this in few different ways, or you can focus on exploration and expansion, or even on setting up colonies and building them up before moving to the new ones. So taller rather than wider, so to speak. And all that is still just scratching the surface. DOS version of the game is near complete rewrite of the C64 original, upgrading graphics considerably, changing the interface into a menu-based one, and adding a lot of content, like ground-based armies, new planetary mechanics, new technology trees for navigation and industry, and progressive social maintenance costs. It's the ultimate version of the game, as good if not better than the Amiga outing. Doom, or actually I should say Doom, Wolfenstein, Quake. Cool games, right? id Software definitely knew how to pull an amazing shooter, a groundbreaking one. And not once, but thrice. Some would argue that more than that, because we had Quake 2 and Quake 3 Arena and even Quake 4, all great and important in their own ways. Seriously, just think what an amazing run they had with these. But before them there was a little game called Rescue Rover. Well, Rescue Rover 2 too, but we'll get into that one in a few minutes. Rescue Rover is as far from first-person shooters as games can get. It's a puzzler. Yep, so instead of pew-pewing at aliens, you're shooting puzzling problems at your brain cells. So why oh why id Software would develop such a game? Well, believe it or not, but they had some kind of a contractual obligations to the earlier publishers of Disk and didn't want to give them their best games. The shareware version of Rescue Rover came with 10 levels and purchase unlocked additional 20. Each level starts at the ladder with you playing as Roger, having to find it and bring Rover back with you to said ladder. To unlock the path to the exit for Rover, you'll need to move objects scattered around the game board, and these objects are all different, have unique, often required in puzzling characteristics, and not only need to be moved in a way that would allow passage, but also to solve any and all potential puzzles along the way. So for instance, crates float in water, mirror blocks reflect laser light, star pearls are, well, pearls, and that's just a few of them. Additionally, there are glowing floors you can't walk on, laser projectors, teleporters, and locked-off doors that require access cards to be passable. And while that's already a lot, it's still not all, because there are also enemy robots. And there's 4 kinds of these, each behaving differently. So some of them don't move but always shoot at our heroes when they see them. There are those that chase Roger if given a chance and either run into him, killing him in the process, or shoot him. So, to secure a usable passage, you have to either trap or destroy them. It's not as simple as it initially seemed now, is it? And if I'm to be honest, despite being a game id Software had to make, and not one of their most popular titles, Rescue Rover is actually really fun and playable. If you like puzzle games, that is. Residence 44 Quest is a graphical adventure based on AGI Studios' engine, allowing for creation of text parser adventures similar to early Sierra's games. I've not played it and only ever researched it for this video, so keep that in mind. It was made by the 2 students at the Technical University Delft in the Netherlands and is based on some of their own uni life experiences. So, it's kinda funny, but not overly so. There are a few raunchy scenes, nothing too graphic though, and generally speaking, Residence 44 is pretty well put together title for a small independent release. That said, 1999 when it dropped is not a year parser games should see the light of day. The genre basically died off years before and it should have stayed that way. Buried deep in memories of gamers never to resurface again. And resurrecting its rotten and annoying corpse was not something that was necessary. Point and clicking was the way to go. At least I think so. Anyway, the game starts with you being a freshman in college and moving into an apartment building, the titular Residence 44. The plot is incredibly linear and simple, but not bad, not what I mean at all, at least for as much as I could learn about it. And you'll need to meet everyone living in the building and perform different requested tasks from them to proceed. First, funny enough, being getting rid of quote-unquote slut, not my phrasing, that's causing everyone else grief. The puzzles are not overly difficult, even if not all rooted in logic, but the solution to some may require a little trial and error. Cause the game originally released in Dutch and then, later on, was translated into English, apparently simplifying gameplay a lot, dropping many of the interactions and conversations from the original. I can't confirm or deny it, cause I don't speak Dutch and haven't played the game, but what's left is plenty enough anyway. Most characters that you'll meet will have a lot to say and contribute to the story, regardless if it will be useful in any of the puzzles or not. I like independent games, which should come as no surprise as I've recently started dropping occasional reviews for this on this channel, and Residence 44 is an early example. Early for an indie, late for a parser game. I don't know man, I feel like it's too odd of a mixture of old and new to appeal to a larger crowd. Also, it's probably the reason for its obscurity if I'm to be honest. Rescue Rover 2, a follow-up to the first game that we spoke about a couple of minutes ago and another of id Software's contractually obligated releases, features basically identical gameplay loop as the first title. So, you play as Roger once more and have to save your dog Rover again in each and every level. The game naturally consists of completely new stages, new deadly robots and gameplay features, keeping previous titles' formula as addictive as it was, but enhancing the graphics a little too. And the difference is rather superficial, but it also kinda makes sense as both games released the very same year. So they didn't have that much time to work on it, especially if they were already working on their FPS classics. One has to wonder if perhaps both Rescue Rovers weren't originally planned to be one game and were split just to fulfill the contract. Naturally, I have no proof of anything, and my doubts are rooted in my cynicism only. I may be way off mark here. Still, Rescue Rover 2 is a fun puzzler, so if you like those, it's definitely worth a look. Robo is a Polish action puzzler that was originally released on 8-bit Atari computers and then ported to other systems, those in particular in 1993. The port is composed out of 60 levels and features gameplay similar to a mixture of Boulder Dash and Sokoban. Story-wise, our protagonist Robo is stranded in space and his spaceship is broken. How terrible. So he must land on different local planets divided into a few local star systems in order to find and collect screws needed to repair his ship. Naturally, it's not a straightforward go from A to B fare, and you'll have to puzzle your way through devilishly convoluted maze-like levels to complete the game. How does it play though? Imagine Boulder Dash but without gravity and with Sokoban-like block pushing. So you have to move the objects in the correct way to create a path for yourself to collect a set number of screws and then complete the level by getting to the exit. Naturally, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, and these planets are not friendly at all. So our electronic hero has to prepare to be met with deadly obstacles, aggressive creatures, laser turrets and magnets among others. Naturally, these planets are not Robo's first space rodeo, and he's not a hopeless and defenseless little bot. He can find bullets that can be used to shoot the enemies. Well, truth be told, they're not really bullets, but batteries powering up Robot's laser for 9 shots each, but you get what I'm getting here at. And there are also bombs that explode upon being shot. And while these two don't seem like a lot, trust me, it's more than enough. I mean, there are also pushable crates, doors and corresponding to them keys, mirrors and teleports, all to add to the puzzling fun. Robo is an interesting title, as while it was incredibly popular on the Atari systems, at least in Poland, hardly anyone knew of a DOS version, which is a pity as it's a really well thought out and genuinely rewarding to experience game. When Robo released, the developer promised first 5 players to complete the game their next title for free. All they had to do is send them detailed description of an end sequence in mail. Yes, the one without E at the beginning of it. It is said that by 1991, devs received a good few thousand of answers. Imagine that. Sand Warriors takes place on the planet Taui, where 2 large houses of Saturn horrors are at each other's throats, bound in a never-ending war for the throne and rule of the planet. Interestingly enough, why a completely foreign planet follows our Egyptian beliefs is beyond my scope of understanding. But I'm a simple man and there's a lot I don't get in life. Like wars, violence and prejudice. In Sand Warriors, you take a role of a low-ranking young pilot of a house of horrors fighting against the opposing faction in series of 24 action-packed missions. There are a few kinds of these, from reconnaissance through salvage to stopping enemy forces, and they all are well thought out and pretty fun to pew your way around them. Cause for the most part, Sand Warriors plays like a bit enhanced/modified terminal velocity. Campaign plays out during both day or at night, and as you progress through it, you will also advance in ranks, which in turn will allow you to access new and much more powerful weapons, ranging from chain guns to nuclear devices. If you ever find yourself on the verge of running out of ammo, you'll need to locate weapon stores and raid them. Your shield, cause your ship has one, recharges itself automatically if it's not receiving any damage for a while. Flares are a nice touch too, allowing you to mitigate damage by redirecting enemy missiles in those hot and tight situations you'll no doubt find yourself in, and make this otherwise arcade shooter feel a tiny itty bit like a simulation. Which, let's be clear here, Sand Warriors is most definitely not. Presentation-wise, at the time of its release, Sand Warriors SVGA graphics were exceptional, though it has to be said that the landscapes, because of their sand-based looks, felt rather empty and devoid of interesting scenery objects or any real landmarks. It's largely irrelevant though, as the focus in it should be based on fast-paced action anyway, of which there's plenty enough of. Sand Warriors may not be the most innovative 3D shooter out there, but it's a really solid and fun romp, and all fans of games like Terminal Velocity or Fury 3 will definitely enjoy it. Rebel Moon, the game, not a tad disappointing Netflix movie, is a book example of the obscure. It's a first-person shooter that upon its release was only available and compatible with Creative Labs 3D Blaster 3D Accelerator cards. What a tongue twister. Well, with all cards sporting Rendition Verity 1000 chipset to be precise, but there weren't that many others really. So, is it totally unplayable today? Not really, not many people know about it, but by adding -VGA with no spaces suffix to the exe file when launching the game, it is actually possible to force it to launch without the seemingly required accelerator. Anyway, Rebel Moon takes place in the middle of the 21st century, so, well, soon, and you play as a member of the Lunar Defense Force, in short, LDF, preparing for the war for the independence of all of Moon's 20 or so colonies from Earth. All because as the years passed, Earth treated lunar citizens less and less as equals and more as cheap disposable workforce, supplying the blue marble with precious resources. The fragile status quo had to be broken eventually, and the game starts just as it does. As you play Rebel Moon, you'll go through a series of interesting missions, each with its own objectives, so you'll be finding and destroying Earth Force's infrastructures, you'll seek out and destroy enemy strongholds or even defend LDF locations against oncoming Earth offensive among others. There will be a lot of interesting things to do, other than just going from A to B killing everything in Rebel Moon is what I'm saying here. The armament is pretty fun and varied too, and you'll use all kinds of uniquely feeling weapons. From bog standard for the game laser pistols, through chain-fed railguns, all the way to the plasma rifles. Rebel Moon's graphics are pretty nice, but a little generic sci-fi feeling if you know what I mean, so while they're not out of place or disappointing per se, they also won't surprise you with anything along the way. So, is Rebel Moon any good? It's decent, but not something you'll remember like Duke 3D or Quake. and you should only ever seek it out if you're a hardcore fan of the genre or if you want to try out a game that seemingly no one had a chance to when it originally released. Obligatory Korean game time. Editor, cue some sick K-pop beats here in the background for me, please. Oh wait, I don't have an editor, and I know nothing about K-pop really, apart from maybe that there's Blackpink. I think I'll just carry on as is. Okay, let's see if I will butcher it or not. Rion UI Mohyom, Jesus, is a side-scrolling adventure platformer in which you play as an anthropomorphic lion protagonist. The plot of the game revolves around contest among the animals aimed at picking the new king of the animal kingdom. And since you play as a lion, one thing you have to do is represent your species like a badass. Not only cats overall, but you know, it is expected from you to win. I mean, I expect you to win, and not only cause you're a lion, but also because you're you. Anyway, for the most part, the game which title I won't attempt to pronounce again plays like any other always scrolling platformer, so you go through series of mainly horizontally progressing level, defeating tons of cute, detailed and nicely animated enemies, and occasional bosses too. All of said bosses are naturally other competitors for the crown, but if I'm to be honest, the whole becoming the king of the animals thing is just a background story and doesn't really influence the gameplay in any meaningful way. As you complete the levels, you also collect coins, which then in turn can be used to purchase extra power-ups or weapons from merchants scattered around the levels. Interestingly enough, our lion has a bit of a Sonic in him, and other than the jump and attack, he also has a speed up button, which held allows him to build up speed to considerable levels. It's not always necessary, but since the levels are timed, it may come in handy from time to time. Graphics and sounds, same as in most other Korean games of the time, are both pleasant to look at and listen to, and definitely feel like a lot of attention was given to the presentation to keep it attractive. It's worth pointing out that this impossible to pronounce game supposedly also released in English too, as Adventure of Leon no less. That said, I've never seen it in any other language than Korean, so if you're not a better researcher than myself, keep in mind that you'll experience it the same way. Dialogues and story snippets are rather one-sided, so it's not really an issue if you just want to enjoy it as a platformer and don't care much about the plot. Sea Legends is definitely one of the most interesting games in today's video. So, despite how it looks like, I'm not leaving it for the last because of that, but by a pure coincidence. I've also never played it, and it's the one I'm most keen about trying out if I ever get a chance. At its core, Sea Legends is a spiritual successor to Sid Meier's Pirates, but originating from Russia and featuring original and unique story of its own. It's a pirate life simulator taking place in the Caribbean. You play as Richard Grey, a young British captain of a noble heritage, who travels the seas aboard his majestic frigate Hephaestus. And acting as him, you can, same as in original classic, follow a rather linear but full of twists and unexpected turns fun story, or just forfeit it all and live out your best swashbuckling life. Pirating all ships within your reach, drowning your sorrows in sea of grog, polishing your wooden peg leg, and feed random parrots crackers. So, you'll be sailing the seas in your ship and eventually a whole fleet of ships if you play your cards right. You'll fight countless battles on the seas from a very immersive first-person perspective, I must add. Well, immersive for the time at least. Although if you think about it, even today you don't have that many games that would allow you to pick what kind of cannonballs to use, what part of the enemy's ship should you shoot them at to cause as much damage as possible, so perhaps even today it's in the top end for the immersivity. I mean, modern Sea of Thieves is fun and all, but I'm not sure if even in it you can choose as much. Anyway, you'll also hire crew, trade, pirate and plunder, and most of all, you'll have a lot of fun. There are naturally towns in the game in which you can do most of the above, and also save game in churches. Odd place to do so, but whatever. Upon its release, Sea Legends was a game that was largely ignored and overlooked by the gaming community, and it's difficult to say why, as it's a really cool and playable package. Or so I heard. But as the time went by, it slowly started gaining traction, popularity, and eventually grew to a rank of still obscure, but nonetheless cult classic. And as such, it stayed to this very day. Sea Rock is one of the most obscure games you've ever heard of, and also a very playable, unique and innovative title. It was designed by ex-Navy veterans, and it's one of the most realistic wreck hunting simulations to date. Yup, even now 30 years later. You sail the Atlantic and Caribbean seeking wrecks and managing crew of your modern treasure hunters. You know, those who have fewer rapiers in hand, no cannons and more electronics than one would ever need. The goal here theoretically is to accumulate enough wealth to retire and never work again. I think most of us would be happy with said outcome. Personally, I'm ready to leave the workforce now and never do anything again, just travel the world and spend the money. And I am not a big spender. I'm happy with having enough to be able to throw it at problems. Oh my god, how did we get here? Anyway, coming back to our game, you find tips, maps and stories about treasures in bars, libraries and from researchers, and then head off to find them. Treasures, not the researchers. Keep in mind while playing that not all maps and treasure tales are true and some may be fake, so not all trips will yield any results. But let's assume that this one does, so you go to the coordinates signified on the map and then send some of your men down, few with spear guns for protection from underwater fauna and others with metal detectors. You'll map out terrain according to the metal lurking beneath the mook, salvaging anything of value. Each of the ships and anything of value that you can find can be identified, and there are literally hundreds of known real-life wrecks included, each with historically accurate cargo manifest and background information. All the, excuse me the phrasing, booty that you'll find you can take back to port and sell, and collect information about any other possible treasure locations. In time, you'll be able to afford so-called Sea Rogue, a very expensive high-tech treasure hunting mini-submarine, and having it will be a game changer, in both literal and metaphorical meaning of the word. Oh, and I failed to mention it before, but you have a rival in-game, Eddie, who's out to swoop the treasures from under your nose. And if you're wondering if the Titanic is in the game too, let me assure you that it most definitely is, and in its true-to-life resting spot no less. Sea Rogue is a title that I feel deserved much more recognition than it ever received and would benefit from a modern remake, a high-budget presentation to sell its idea, as I believe that today, in the era of indie games, it could be quite successful. And since we're on the subject of Titanic, our next game is Search for the Titanic, a title that leaves little to the imagination. It's an oceanographic simulation in which you must build your reputation by exploring various lost vessels and earning money in the process. Sounds familiar? Like something you've heard a minute or so ago? Well, cause it's same thing that is. Your ultimate goal is securing enough funding to get a ship, crew and equipment necessary to head off to search for the titular infamous ship. It will require a lot of planning too, but that's beside the point. Money comes from sponsorships, which in turn depend on results of your previous voyages. There are 75 shipwrecks included in the game, 100 maps and charts and 47 unique ports to visit too. Each expedition that you're on poses a series of risks. From an obvious of wreck not being there at all, through crew members declining health, unfavorable weather conditions, to running out of supply or funds, among others. While grand majority of wrecks and treasures are based on true-to-life locations and historical data, there are a few of those imaginary too. Like Noah's Ark for instance. You could say that Search for the Titanic is very similar to the aforementioned Sea Rogue, and you wouldn't be wrong about it. Sea Rogue seems to be a spiritual successor to it, with a difference that Search for the Titanic puts much more emphasis on careful and methodical preparation stages, while Sea Rogue focuses on detailed, and there's no better way of saying it, action-packed diving sections. Both are fun in their own right, and if they ever were combined, they'd make an excellent and near-perfect single game tackling the subject. I've covered my fair share of 3D versus fighting games so far, and I've seen them all, good, bad and those in between. But Cento is easily one of the worst. I mean, as much as I despise FX Fighter, the reasons are many and covered in a video that included it, so I won't get into it today, but compared to Cento, it's a masterpiece. Those of you that have a keen eye will notice certain similarities between Cento and another game we've covered a couple of months ago, Creep Clash. And yep, if you did indeed, you're 100% correct, the same devs made both of these monstrosities. Cento uses 3D flat-shaded polygonal models and environments, and the engine powering it all is terrible. The arenas are empty and blocky, the fighters devoid of both character and details, and the animation is beyond trash. It's somehow floaty and stiff at the same time. Jerky jumps between very few moves that the characters have are equally as annoying as they are tiresome. But that's not all, I'm afraid. Games live or die by their control schemes, and the default here is something out of nightmares. You won't believe how awful it is. Instead of arrows or WASD, you're using WAXD, with a W not being up but forward and X not duck or down but backward movement. And keep in mind that you're looking at the fighters from a side view perspective. If you're shaking your head in disbelief, trust me, I've got more of these here. Q is attack, S defense and E is jump. Now, look at your keyboard and tell me, how in the hell are you supposed to use those? It's impossible with one hand, it's impossible with two, and I haven't got 3 of them to check it out. It's a horror. The arena is boring too, yes, singular, and more often than not, fights end not with one of the characters beating the other to the pole, but just falling off of the arena's edge into his or her demise, which is still a much better ending than having to play this third. Oh wait, I forgot to tell you about a dozen or so of characters. You know why? Cause there aren't that many. In fact, there's 4, each with their unique weapons of hammer, battle axe, sai or katana. And other than the way these weapons look, the characters don't feel any different from one another. All are sluggish moving, you never feel as if you were in full control, and the fun factor only ever peaks from behind the mountain of poo when you press the escape key on your keyboard, instantly quitting to DOS. Cento is trash, so unless you are fighting a maniac and have to sample them all, avoid this one like a plague. Once peaceful village of Jellyme has been under an evil wizard's black magic spell for the last 50 years and trapped and suffering. A young sorcerer apprentice Sergei must find a way to break the black magic spell and free the village. And since it may be a bit unclear, black magic is one word and it's not kind of a magic in this context, but a stupid-ass name for a stupid-ass wizard. Hope that clears it up. Naturally, you play as Sergei and go through this parser-based adventure all on your own. And I mean it, cause I'm not touching it. While Sergei's Destiny is an adventure game made with Sierra's AGI engine, it has some superficial role-playing elements too, namely quests and experience points. So finishing the earlier rewards the latter, which in turn allows you to learn new spells. These are cast by typing their names into a parser, same you would any other command, and the most obvious Abracadabra, Hocus Pocus and Shazam are all in the game too. First allows you to read the ancient writings whenever you encounter them, second turns you into fish and back naturally too, and last lifts large and heavy objects. I've never played Sergei's Destiny, it released in 2001 and used a text parser, so required not only launching from within the DOS, but also typing in commands, and it's something I've not done in years in my games by then, and wasn't planning on doing so ever again. If you don't mind parsers, however, then from what I could find about it, it's apparently a pretty decent game in terms of both story and fun. Maybe not on Sierra's level, but worth checking out nonetheless. Personally, I don't see it happening even if you offer me a plate full of bacon. And I love bacon. But 2 or 3 platefuls? Now, that's another story entirely. Serpent Head is a fantasy first-person perspective adventure game. A peaceful kingdom of Zenaria is ruled by the just king Itor III. Saloran, an evil brother to the royal mage Ophiuchus. Oh my god, this name is impossible to pronounce. Anyway, Saloran, as I was saying, decided that he wanted a shot at ruling the lands, so he formed an alliance with Storm, the king of the dragons, and attacked. Fortunately, Royal Mage, who shall for the rest of the story he remain nameless, and totally not because I don't know how to say his name, used the magic staff known as Serpent Scepter to defeat Saloran. Fearing that someone might use its power for evil, the Royal Mage broke the scepter in pieces and hid them in the ruins of the castle Irongate. Years later, Saloran, and if you're feeling like you're getting lost in all these names, it's that bad, evil and awful Dark Mage brother, came back, defeated a new Royal Mage, and took the scepter to Castle Serpent Head, claiming the kingdom as his own. And he's been ruling it with an iron hand ever since. People of Zanalia live in fear and terror. You play as Sir Marim, and your quest is to get into the castle, find the scepter and defeat Saloran, preferably in this exact order. Naturally, the castle's filled with obstacles, traps and tons of puzzles, all of them having to be conquered. If you like adventure games, this one's definitely worth a look. Shadow Force is a shareware first-person sci-fi futuristic adventure game with some very superficial RPG elements. It takes place in the 22nd century and places you in a command of a four-man team of enhanced humanoids known as titular Shadow Force, a special operations unit created to battle threats that no one else could face, like fighting rogue AI or stopping an alien invasion. You know, a unit you'd be a leader of. Anyway, the game is composed out of 3 large scenarios, with only first one available in the shareware version. And they are Rise of the Overlord, Gatekeeper, and the Final Paradox. Most of the time you'll be solving various in terms of their theme and difficulty puzzles, both inventory and environmental, and occasionally you'll face enemies that will require putting down. Combat in Shadow Force is rather clunky and not thought out at all really, relying in equal amounts on how fast you can click and luck, hoping you won't get hit too much. Which is unfortunate as ammo and health packs are limited and you don't just find them in every single room that you enter. In the first mission, you're investigating happenings on the space station Icarus. As you get there, you realize that something's bad had to take place, as there seems to be dead bodies everywhere, covering the floors like a carpet of blood and guts, and the robots stationed there are running rampant, killing everything in sight. So, you will need to solve the situation, all the while making sure to shut down station's reactor that's rigged to explode. The other two missions are as, if not more interesting, so if you like sci-fi adventures and are capable of overlooking some minor annoyances, Shadow Force is worth your time. Shadowgate is an adventure game set in fantasy world where you're sent off to the ancient keep of Shadowgate on a quest to find mysterious artifact known as the Staff of Ages, and also stop evil warlock from summoning the powerful and deadly demon Behemoth. I always thought that it was Baphomet, but clearly I was wrong. The keep itself is filled with various monstrosities, mythical and demonic alike, and full of traps to stop any and all adventurers stupid enough to try to stand in the warlock's way. Since you're gonna be traveling through the dark and evil-filled fortress, it's crucial that you keep a source of light with you at all times. If I wasn't clear, I meant at all times. I mean, you're not a man-bat, you don't own a bat cave, and are not intimate with an overwhelming darkness. You're a day creature, a dayman. Hero or no hero, stay in the light. Cause outside of it, death awaits. Come to think of it, death is actually everywhere. And Shadowgate is probably the game in which it's easiest to die out of all the adventure titles that I've ever played. In this, it puts early Sierra games to shame. I mean, a single wrong click, a small decision, anything can kill you. And it will. So be careful, save often, and consider all possible outcomes of all smallest decisions that you'll make. Or don't play the game, one of the two. Shadows of Cairn is a special one. Why? Because it showed so much promise and had a huge potential, but then blew it all on awful design decisions and unpolished, nay, broken gameplay design. Story-wise, you're Quinn, a thief apprentice who has to prove himself to be admitted to the guild. Thing is, you're also a goody two-shoes and can't possibly make yourself steal anything from the innocents, which makes you a perfect scapegoat for the murdering of Duke of Cairn. Your guildmaster killed him and blamed it all on you, finding a perfect person to blame. Naive, no-speaking, inexperienced in combat and unskilled thief. So, you're now both haunted by the former guildmates and Duke's guard. You must find a way to prove your innocence and bring the real killer to justice. Shadows of Cairn is a side-view fantasy-themed action-adventure that's near impossible to complete, at least while not cheating or exploiting it. Why? Because while you can sneak past the enemies through most of the game, every now and then you'll have to face some of them in combat. And it's the most broken thing you've seen. Sure, you can punch and kick high, mid and low, so a lot for the game of the kind, but the enemies are so much better at it, often using weapons with high reach. It's clear that the game was not designed for it and it was a late addition. And as much as you try, you'll fail. There are two ways I know of that the game can be beat. So, you either have to resort to using cheat modes, invincibility to be precise, it's not fun as you can imagine, or to scaling the castle war near the beginning of the game where you can bypass all of the story and combat, effectively completing the game in just few short minutes. Even less fun. And henceforth, I can't recommend it. But if you're feeling up for the challenge, there is nothing stopping you from trying. Well, common sense should. Shannara is a first-person fantasy adventure game based on a series of novels by Terry Brooks. Also, a 75th game in the genre in today's video somehow. An evil warlock Brona, after years of peace and prosperity in the world, is prophesied to return. Elder Druid Alanon tells you a story of your father Shay, who's been a legendary hero known for defeating the warlock in the past. You are told, however, that this time wielding a sword of Shannara will not be enough, and you must travel to the lands of different races populating the world to convince them to put their differences aside and join forces against the evil Spellweaver. There is virtually no environmental puzzles in Shannara, but it's filled to the brim with inventory and dialogue ones, where picking a wrong option in the conversation may pose serious consequences. There are battle sequences in the game too. They don't happen very often, but when they do, they play out in turns and are usually there to fit the plot-related events. I feel that addition of combat was not really necessary, but it's not disrupting or annoying enough to serve as a detractor from playing. While you're portraying a singular hero, Jack Ormsford, you get to meet many NPCs, and some of them will even join you on your adventure to contribute their abilities to overcoming of certain situations or solve puzzles. Shannara is probably the best adventure game in this video, so if you have time for just one, you know which to pick. Shiftrix is a top-down puzzler that's similar and opposite to a more well-known Atomics in the same time. And what do I mean by that? Well, it's also about pushing blocks, so you push them around an enclosed level, and they keep moving in the direction until they stop at an obstacle or another block. But unlike Atomics, you don't create intricate shapes from them, but have to remove them from the level by forming groups of identical blocks. So it's a matching game of sorts. If two or more blocks of the same kind touch, they disappear. The goal here obviously is to clear all levels of all blocks. Each stage is timed, so you'll have to work both fast and smart. Especially that the further you get, the more mind-boggling the challenges will be. Some levels also contain bombs, which can be used to destroy singular blocks. In many of the stages, bombs are a part of the puzzle to solve, but in others they may be used as means of saving the stage after failing, so to speak. Shift tricks can be played in multiplayer, which is not often seen in puzzlers, and even less so with a choice of game modes. Here you can either play alternating, each of you having a chance to complete a level, or together at once in turns on a single stage, each moving one block at a time. If you enjoy puzzle and logic games, it may be something down your alley. Sign of the Sun is a sci-fi post-apocalyptic point-and-click adventure game. In the far-off future, after a series of nuclear disasters that devastated Earth and knocked it off of its original location into orbit much closer to the Sun, the atmosphere on the planet has changed considerably. Once blue and green marble is now predominantly in shades of yellow and orange, and in grand majority a sandy barren wasteland devoid of life. Humanity seems to be doomed and on the verge of extinction. Until the discovery of the metal ormorium that seems to be able to protect against the sun's heat and radiation. The gimmick is, the Earth has so little time left that to be able to save it, the ore has to be tested directly on the sun. You play as James Mariner, a test pilot who has been chosen to pilot the Firefly, an experimental craft plated with the new material and modified to be the test subject, and also deploy the probe within the sun's corona and monitor the results. Naturally, if things went great, we'd not have a game to play. So, as you go about your oh-so-important mission, you find yourself meeting a strange alien civilization and face what they left behind. Generally speaking, Sign of the Sun is a typical point-and-click adventure that's mainly focusing on the inventory puzzling. Unlike most games in the genre though, it features quite a few action sequences, many of them being combat-oriented. Which is its biggest issue too, cause not only they are rather clunky, but the controls for fighting are some of the worst you've seen, mainly utilizing numeric keyboard. So you never really feel comfortable trying to pull off any of the attack or defensive moves. These action sequences are not only not the best, but also one of them is hard-baked at the very beginning of the game, effectively detracting most of its potential gamers with its shoddy design from playing. What I personally dislike about Signs of the Sun the most, however, are the graphics. Namely pre-rendered characters turned into sprites. I didn't like it in Donkey Kong Country, an arguably much better game, even if in an entirely different genre, and I most definitely don't like it here. It's the worst aging kind of 2D graphics. Silas Quest is a very simple platformer and a title that's more similar to the arcade games of the year than any in its own genre. It's an overly simplistic in its design game, clearly aimed at younger audiences. I don't think that there's any real story behind it, at least none that I would know of, but it doesn't really need to have one, because all you have to do in each of the levels is kill all the enemies by jumping on their heads. You know, like Mario, or a psychopath. I mean, perhaps he was one too, we have no way of knowing today, he's ancient now. All we know for a fact is that same as Silas Quest's protagonist, that is bottom heavy blob without arms I must add, he loved jumping on cute creatures' heads. Still, if you clear the stage of all of them, the game enters a 60 seconds long bonus section in which you must collect as many stars as you can for points. And that's it. No, really, there's no special stages, no bonuses and no real ending. You go through all the levels and then the game ends. Well, truth be told, you don't go through all the stages, as they're beyond boring and repetitive after your third or fourth, but if you would, you'd see nothing new all throughout. Silas Quest released in 1997, and by then even it was already outdated in everything: sounds, graphics, animation and most of all gameplay design. While the graphics are not bad per se, they're workable at best, the animations are smooth, but the controls and character movement especially feel unpleasantly floaty. So, to summarize, if you're a hardcore fan of platformers and have to play them all, then yeah, this one's not broken at all, just not very fun, and you may check it out. But if you're not, then skip it. Yeah, it's not very good. Silent Shadow is an arcade shoot-'em-up that originated on C64 in 1988 and was ported to PC 3 years later, virtually unchanged. The game is supposedly set in the Persian Gulf, and you must go through 4 unique stages of enemy airbase, city, desert and sea to complete it, with the ultimate goal being destruction of the enemy fleet. Your fighter is state-of-the-art machine for the make-believe 1988, and you naturally have to dispose of any and all enemies coming your way, regardless of how many it might be. And it will be a lot, trust me. You don't really get to find and use any power-ups, and the weapon you start with is the weapon you'll end with, so it's more of a skill-based shooter than one relying on progressive upgrades to carry on, which has its up and downsides. You do get smart bombs clearing the screen of all enemies though, which is always fun, but I suggest keeping those for when you've no other choice, as means of last resort of survival, so to speak. If you look at the Silent Shadow and think that it looks a bit 8-bit-ish, then you're right. It feels like it too. And not much has changed from the original. The gameplay hasn't been improved, you can still enjoy it in two-player mode, and the graphics are only really upgraded in terms of their resolution, not featuring any considerable bumps in their quality, which given the game's origin, I can't understand, but I'd love one change to be made to it. Instead of keeping the gameplay window constrained to a hair-thin vertical strip, it would be cool if it was remade to cover the whole screen. What I'd like and what's reality are two different things though. Best proof of that is the fact that I still have to go to my day job, which I hate with a passion of 1,000 dead poets, and are not traveling multimillionaire. Still, the game would benefit from a larger play area. Silent Shadow is definitely not great, but it's decent and most of all very charming, so if you're someone who appreciates shooters, you'll no doubt at the very least like it. Silly Rabbit, tricks are for kids. Silly Night, makeups for chicks. I really don't know where I was going with it, other than the bottomless well of cringe. Anyway, Silly Night is an interesting title and one definitely worth a look. So if you're gonna pick just one game out of this whole video, this should be the one. It's a medieval-themed action platformer that released in 2017 as freeware, being created as an entry for a DOS game creation competition. There's hardly any story behind it, you're a silly knight, and you're lost in a maze like enormous castle. Your goal is to find your way through its medieval moss-covered bowels to get to the throne room, all to grab the throne and become your next step transformation a la Frieza from Dragon Ball Z, so a silly king. I presume. I have no facts to support this claim. You're armed with a sword only initially and have to explore the castle fighting your way through dozens of deadly creatures. So bats, skeletons and evil red knights among others. If that was all, however, given your skills and a superhero status, you'd complete the game in no time. Probably before I finish talking about it. But there are also traps, quite a few of them in fact, so you have to parkour your way around them to survive too. There's no lives in the game, but you can save it at numerous spots by lighting fires at specific locations, which will from then onward serve as respawn points. As most castles, this one too will require quite a lot of environmental puzzling, so you'll need to find keys to be able to progress through locked-off areas. It's nothing you've not done before, so shouldn't be an issue really. There are also health bonuses replenishing your life energy and power-ups, so finding these should be a priority. Interestingly enough, while only sporting PC speaker sound, Silly Night uses undocumented CGA display mode, which apparently is a subset of a text mode allowing for display of graphics and sprites in 160 by 100 in 16 colors. I'm no expert on CGA or any other GA really, so I may be wrong here, but that's what I was able to find about it, and it seems like a fun little factoid. Being a modern and not retro title, Silly Night theoretically should have no place in this video, but the channel's called Old and New Video Games, and it's a DOS game in CGA, so I feel that Silly Night fits in perfectly. Scenaria Lost in Space is a sci-fi themed Metroidvania action platformer. The world of Scenaria is in danger. Yep, again. I mean, again something is in danger and you have to step in, not Scenaria again. We've not spoke about it before. So yeah, it's in danger and the evil Stomper and his minions are threatening it. The destruction is inevitable it seems. But wait a minute, we've got you, right? You are free this afternoon, am I correct? Great. So how about you go and deal with it? Please and thank you. I knew you'd say yes and not fail the innocent citizens of Scenaria. You are the best. And if by any chance you said no, please know that you are forever dead to me and blocked from this channel. I mean, I have no way of confirming who did or did not say it, so I'm just gonna block 100 of you on random. Or am I? Anyway, the game world is rather large and interestingly designed, featuring a surprising number of hidden passages and locations. An add-on in the form of X-ray vision allows you to discover them all. And generally speaking, you should get used to the idea of tools, as you'll need to find and use quite a few different ones, to solve bits and pieces of environmental puzzling all throughout the game. So, Saturn Ball for instance allows you to transform into a ball and squeeze through small passages. Jump Boots, as you might have guessed going by the creative naming alone, increases your jump's reach. And Swivel lets you grapple onto special blocks and swing over obstacles. Scenaria Lost in Space released as a shareware and was planned as a two-parter, with Return of Stomper meaning to drop a little after. Sales, popularity, or lack thereof of either must have been a factor that prevented the second game from coming out. Today, so many years later, the reason is irrelevant. What is though, is that Scenario is genuinely a really fun game to get lost in, with a lot of cool mechanics, little secrets and addictive gameplay. If Silly Night was not something down your alley, check Scenario out, as it's as good. I loved Cinemaware games. They were often of different genres and themes, sure, but always had one thing in common. A very cinematic movie-like design, full of minigames and uniquely playing out scenes. And hardly ever anything on the market could compare to them in quality of presentation and gameplay ideas. Sinbad and the Throne of the Falcon may not be their best, but it's definitely a very good game. Especially compared to what was available on PC at the time. You play as Sinbad, the sailor from 1001 Arabian Nights, roaming seas in search for the riches, power and true love. The game starts with you playing as Sinbad, already being a well-known, nay, famous adventurer and a close friend to Caliph's family. So, when the Princess Sylphanie found her father turned into a falcon, you're the one who's called in to help. The most obvious suspect of the crime is one of Caliph's sons, Evil Black Prince, a name that truly says it all. And this is where the game starts. You have to find a way to return Caliph to his original form before the transformation becomes permanent and in the same time defend the capital against Black Princess armies. If it falls, the game ends with a failure. The adventure will take you to different locations and will let you take part in many uniquely cinematically presented activities, like visiting gypsy sorceress for the magic charm, famous seductress, and not for what you think you'd want to meet with her. You'll sword fight numerous times with many opponents, you'll shoot at demonic birds, pteranoxos that serve the Black Prince, you'll sail dangerous waters avoiding sharp rocks and picking up shipwrecked sailors, you'll be raiding a Cyclops cave to save your crewmates, and you'll even encounter platforming sections with ladders among others. You won't get bored in Sinbad is what I'm saying, and we'll have a lot of fun all throughout it. If you add to it a stellar for the time visual presentation, it's even more of an enchanting package to waste some hours in. The only thing that I could honestly complain about here is the sound design, namely use of a PC speaker only, as sadly it's the only option of hearing any beeps and boops while playing. When compared to Amiga, Atari ST or in case of sound even Commodore 64, PC may not look or sound especially competitive, but if you don't compare that is, you won't feel as if you're missing anything and will have a blast. Scunny in the Wild West is an arcade action platformer, and a first of Scunny Games series of shareware titles released in the early to mid-90s that we'll cover today. Scunny, if you're wondering, is an anthropomorphic orange squirrel that's just a tiny bit more annoying than having already rather bad games Babsy. Scunny is a protagonist in all his games, hence the title, and they're nearly always in completely different genres and of very varied quality, usually ranging between terrible and bad, with an occasional decent outlier. Wild West is not great. Scunny's mom sends him back in time into 1909 to recover the sheep that have been stolen from the farm of his great-grandparents. So, armed with your trusted water pistol, playing as the ginger rodent, you have to recover all the sheep, all the while fighting off various enemies. Some can be permanently killed off, others respawn after a while. While being touched by the enemy, you only lose a portion of your life counter. Falling from the platform, most often than not, is an instant death. Along the way, other than the pistol, you'll get to grab hearts refilling your HP or crates that can be dropped anywhere to let you jump higher than you would have otherwise. Scunny in the Wild West is composed out of 10 incredibly boring-ass levels, with only 2 of them available in the shareware version. Presentation-wise, there's nothing here to amaze you, sounds are decent but nothing special, they fit to what's on the screen. Which is good cause graphics, while rather nice separately put together, look out of place. I don't know what to say about them, but they just don't seem to fit well together. And you know what? That's not it. I have 2 more Scunny games to tell you about today. Scunny Lost in Space? Yes, it should have been. Oh wait, I'm getting ahead of myself here. It's a second game in the series in today's video, and it's only marginally better than the last. It could be argued that no Scunny games were truly great and all were meat or meat adjacent, but at the very least this one's more arcade oriented, so has that pick up and play feeling to it that the former covered platformer didn't. Story-wise, and it's a pretty dumb story in this one, all of the TV satellite dishes have been stolen by the horde of schnoozes. Now, what schnoozes are, I don't know. Well, other than the villains of this game, whose name sounds like something you may bring back from one of those visits to exotic countries if you go there unvaccinated against the local diseases. You know, one of those conditions that cause you to ooze green brownish colored goo from all the cavities in your body. Usually all at once. Yuck. Anyway, so the satellite dishes are gone, which in 1993 might have been the problem as people still watched TV, so the best of the best astronaut badasses we could find have been sent to the moon to recover them. As soon as they arrived, however, they've been captured and are now a subject of weird alien rituals of hopefully not an erotic nature. Your scunny hard nut, a hard nut to crack. And a super agent extraordinaire sent to the moon to do both, what previous parties sent there failed completing, and also to rescue them in the process. As you can see in the footage, Scunny Lost in Space is nothing more than a bit reworked Moon Patrol clone. So you're going from left to right in each and every stage, killing ground and air enemies, avoiding numerous obstacles and collecting pickups. And this can be lives, health refills or extra ammo. Because yes, you don't die at a single hit but have a life counter, and ammo is limited. So while it's similar to aforementioned Moon Patrol, it's also considerably easier. Graphics are not bad in this one, they have this very strong early 90s shareware vibe, and while they may not be on the same level as those of commercial releases, I always found shareware presentation very charming in its crude simplicity. The game, same as the previous, is composed out of 10 levels, 2 of them in the shareware release, and as these trash Scunny games go, this one's surprisingly not terrible and just meh. Scunny Desert Raid is the last game in the series that I'll be able to gather strength to talk about today, I promise, to you and myself. It's also a horizontally scrolling shoot 'em up that's kinda similar to Scramble, a much better original game I must add. You might have noticed a pattern already of every of those Scunny games copying some other, older classic, bringing it to the early 90s quality of presentation and losing a lot of the original's playability in the process. And it kinda fits, as the company that made these unquestionable pieces of shovelware was called Copysoft. Yep, they've been brash enough to put it in their name. Anyway, Desert Raid is built out of 6 near-identical stages in which you're going from left to right in your biplane, shooting various ground and air enemies, and rockets. I don't know why, but for whatever the reason, a huge chunk of the enemies is ground-based. Like most of them. And while you have unlimited shot, these ground-based ones can only be defeated using bombs, which you guessed it right, are obviously limited. What's worse, to complete the level, you have to bomb a final target at the end of it, so these bombs that you could use throughout the game are best saved up for the end level. Well, at least few of them, which effectively changes the character of Desert Raid from a crappy shoot 'em up into an even crappier dodge 'em up. Because you're trying to navigate between dozens of shots coming your way from below while saving the only weapon you could use efficiently against the ground assailants as much as you can. Whatever. Naturally, you can pick up additional bombs, health packs and very rarely screen clearing super bomb too, but given the onslaught of enemy shots, it's not that easy to do so. Same as the other 2 titles in the series that we've covered here today, Desert Raid lacks variety, lacks feeling of progress, controls are stiff and unresponsive, the fun factor is short-lived too, and replayability is virtually non-existent, cause you won't even like to complete it once, let alone replay it after. Slicks and Slides is one of the most fun you could have in a shareware multiplayer racing on PC in 1993, period. I should really end it here, shouldn't I? It would be more impactful. And yet, I carry on talking. It's a disease, help me. Anyway, Slicks and Slides is a top-down arcade racer. It features over 20 tracks and tons of different vehicles to racing, from motorbikes through regular cars to tanks and flying saucers among others. And a power-up system allowing you to upgrade your vehicle's stats, so you know, handling, acceleration, speed and the likes. If that wasn't enough, you get to purchase and use missiles, mines, rifles, shotguns and others, supplementing your I'm sure mastered after first half an hour of playing near constant ramming of the opponent off their path. Shortcuts are present in most tracks and it's good to learn their best approach vectors fast, as they will let you get a second or two ahead of the rest of the drivers. Look at me, talking about approach vectors, like some kind of a smart guy. Anyway, the most prominent thing about this whole Slicks and Slides ordeal most definitely is fast-paced, crazy and chaotic multiplayer action. Preferably with all of you cramped at a single keyboard, elbowing each other as much as you try to push your friends' cars off the road. It's a barrel of laughs, trust me. Slicks and Slides can be also played in single player, but doing so is a waste of a perfect party game, especially that all the tracks are devilishly fun designed, custom crafted to not only put your driving skills to the test, but also create tons of opportunities for all the cars to battle it out or seek out shortcuts, fighting between all of you for each fraction of a second as if there was no tomorrow. And it's nowhere near as cool if you're playing against always perfect driving and predictable CPU opponents. All I told you about is in the shareware version of the game. When you pull the trigger and pay for it, which you can funny enough do even today for a mere $5, you not only get access to tons more tracks, but also an excellent track editor, which extends the life of this gem near indefinitely. Graphics and sounds may not be groundbreaking in any way, the first is clean and high color, and you never feel like you've lost view of your car in the background while pushing the proverbial pedal to the metal. And the second sounds fitting, and that's as much as we could hope for from a sound design in 1993's Sharer release. Oh, I failed to mention it before, but the controls take getting used to, so even if some corners keep sending you spinning initially, or you feel that they're a bit too sensitive, give them a minute, they will grow on you soon and will feel like a second nature in no time. To summarize, if you have someone to play those classics with, then Slicks and Slides is amazing. But if you don't, it won't prove as addicting, I'm afraid. Sliders is a futuristic sports game that's conceptually a bit similar to Marble Madness, mixed in with football. So, soccer for all you friends across the pond. It is always played against another player, controlled by either human or CPU, and it revolves around exploring an enclosed level, trying to find smaller ball than the one that you control, and then bring it to the opponent's starting point, which also serves as his goal. If you do, you'll score a point. Simple as that. In the same time, you have to stop the opponent from doing the same to you. The game fields often contain special tiles that influence the gameplay when you go over them. So stuff like slowdowns or magnetic arrows, to name a few, will not be something unusual, and you learn to work around them. And sadly, you will. Work around them, that is. Because while adding a few would be a fun game changer, the number of these in some of the levels makes them more annoying than fun. Sometimes less is more, you know. Played against someone else, sliders can prove to be a good fun for an hour or so from time to time, but any longer and the monotony will set in. I can pretty much guarantee it. Graphic design and gameplay mechanics don't change much all throughout the entire game, and after seeing a dozen or so of semi-stages, you've pretty much seen it all. Slordax the Unknown Enemy is a vertically scrolling shoot-em-up which was developed by John Carmack before he left Softdisk to found id Software with John Romero. 700 years prior to when the game takes place, titular Slordax were an alien race waging wars left and right, or left and right up and down I should say really, as it took place in space. Anyway, they tried to conquer all of the known universe, and that's what's important about them. What happened to them between then and now? Nobody knows, they've been long gone and many managed to forget about them altogether. The Intergalactic Defense Alliance, in short IDA, believes that Slordax will return soon and restart their aggressive dealings. So, to make sure that it does not happen, IDA sends their best and brightest fighter in their brand new and still shiny Red Dog Adaptive Strike Ship, which can be shortened to Red Dog AS. Not sure it was intentional, but I can only assume that it's not a coincidence. You play as that exact hero pilot, which is not a surprise, as if anyone can defeat a whole race of alien species, it's you. I mean, I wouldn't like you to, you're good and not a killer and… oh wait, I just realized that IDA is sending you to Slordian part of the galaxy to destroy their bases before they can prepare for an invasion. Invasion that we have no proof of. Especially that after 700 years they could have changed their ways and evolved to be peaceful species. I'm so sorry for sending you there. Honest. No fingers crossed, see? The game is composed out of 5 levels and features various different enemies, environmental dangers and upgradable weapon. Whenever you die, your weapon is reset to the basic single shot, so… staying alive is more than crucial than anything else in this one. And not just because of the weapons, but also because of the lives you'll be taking. I mean saving, yes, saving. Slordax's graphics are pretty standard for EGA shoot-em-ups, and while not spectacular, they don't seem to be too annoying to the eye to enjoy it. Sounds are, well, rather bad, but whatever. The most important thing is that the game's fun, and it is. So if you like arcade titles, make sure not to skip this one. Snowstrike is a flight combat simulator. Strike that. Snowstrike is a flight combat first-person perspective arcade title. It takes place in Colombia and lets you jump behind the flight stick of the F-14 Rapier fighter and take place in series of combat-oriented missions, all designed to stop an evil drug lord once and for all. Snowstrike is as arcade-centric as games can be. Most instruments on your cockpit are there for visual reasons only, and you don't have to pay any attention to them whatsoever. So, all you really need to focus on is getting the enemy into the crosshair and pew-pewing it into non-existence. In that aspect, Snowstrike is very similar to the Afterburner games from Sega, with a difference of a viewpoint only. The enemies are rather varied and mostly Russian-based crafts like MiG-27, 29 and 30 and Su-27 too, all carrying various armament like hit or radar guided missiles. You'll participate in many different missions, from free flight and destruction of drug labs through bombing of refineries, all the way to destruction of drug convoys and shops. The action is fast and furious, and the graphics, while unspectacular, are also not terrible and fit the gameplay loop quite well. Snowstrike features dynamic weather system, which is always fun even in an arcade game, as it allows for that little added tactic of having to approach the enemies from behind the cloud cover, for instance. As shooters go, this one's pretty good, check it out. Space Conflict definitely lives up to its name. It's a turn-based strategy set in space, in which your goal is that simple: to annihilate any and all opposing forces. It can be played against the CPU or another player, and I'd suggest going for the latter, if possible. Each of the two sides of the conflict starts with a starbase, few ships and a bit of cash to get them going. Now, let's be clear here. Space Conflict is neither Master of Orion nor Space Empires. It's a simple strategy that manages to escape the clutches of being called basic by aiming at the niche of gamers that are keen on being challenged strategically but don't feel like spending hours familiarizing themselves with the game, all its inner underlying and interconnected mechanics, and just want to battle it out in space. And the fact that Space Conflict is in this video only proves that there weren't that many of these kinds of gamers on PC, at least not in 1993. Each of the numerous kinds of ships, from scouts to huge destroyers, is described by a series of stats of hull strength, shields, energy, number of weapon base, scan range and number of moves per turn, with attack always counting as a move in combat too. Grid map is divided into sectors, each of capable of holding numerous planets and space phenomena too. That last often having considerable impact on your game, positive or negative. There are two kinds of planets, regular and trade. First can be exploited for resources to fuel your war efforts, so to speak, while second offers repairs and ability to purchase weapons, shields and energy storage upgrades. Starbases commission ships and offer hull repairs. So yeah, that's pretty much it. You gotta expand to support your war and find and destroy your enemy. Simple as that. Or difficult as that. Depends how good of a tactician are you. Space Station Escape takes place on a, well, space station. One of the last few bastions of humanity where we still live. Oh, you're not up to date, let me fix that. Earth was recently destroyed. Yep, sorry to let you know like that. Also, if you're still on the surface, escape. Now! Space Station Escape is a sci-fi first-person shooter in which aliens attacked said station, eliminated or locked off most of its crew, replaced them with bioengineered clones of humans and turned station's automated defense systems against you. So, from the get-go, you're up against an overwhelming enemy forces. The game is built out of 20 levels, 5 of which were available in the shareware version, and goal of each of these is to kill all clones, droids and occasional aliens too, rescuing found captives, and ending with either escape through the exit in allotted time or disarming of station's self-destruct system. There are few weapons in the game and a whole rainbow worth of various keys to open color-coded locked-off areas for that obligatory FPS environmental puzzling. Now, Space Station Escape is by no means a bad game. It's decent, and in 1993 it would have been one of the first few FPSs and would have sold faster than devs could print the registration codes for it and send them out. In 1995, however, when it released, we had dozens of other games in the genre. And let's be clear here, most of them much better than this. So it ended up where it did, in the bottomless pit of unimportant titles forever forgotten by time. If you enjoy FPSs, especially those more like Wolfenstein 3D rather than the newer ones, then yeah, it may be worth a playthrough, at least to tick it off of your list of games to check out. But if you prefer something more substantial, then, simply put, it's not worth the time investment. Speed Racer in the challenge of Racer X had a way too long title to succeed, and it didn't. At least not to remain remembered by the majority of gamers of yesteryears. Not saying that's the title here to blame, especially that it's a rather fun little game, but devs should really give titles a bit more thought than they often do. Anyway, I will call it Speed Racer from now on and let's just leave it at that. So, Speed Racer is an arcade racing game based on American remake of 1960s Japanese anime and feature all the characters found in it. So Speed Racer, his brother Racer X, his father Pops, his mother, his girlfriend Trixie, his little brother Sprittle, and a pet chimpanzee Chim Chim. The goal of the single-player portion of the game is to beat Racer X on all 7 included tracks against other racers, all the while avoiding tons of different obstacles and hazards. Your car, Mach 5, fortunately has a whole plethora of various special features like jumping or driving underwater, and they can be activated when necessary. There's also another car to pick, a Shooting Star, and it's more offensive than defensive-oriented one. Naturally, your Speedster can be upgraded while playing, and you can buy unused weapons too. Speed Racer is really fun, I mean it, but only as long as you don't really treat it as a real racer and more like a card game, where it's as much about racing as it's about having fun on the track, pushing your opponents around and overcoming obstacles. Sounds and graphics are excellent, and if you manage to get someone else to play it with you, do it, as it's a blast that way. StarQuest 1 in the 27th century is probably the best shareware game in today's video, period. So let's jump straight into the next one. I wonder if it crossed your mind that I actually would jump to the next game, that is. Make sure to let me know in the comments below. Anyway, StarQuest is a space combat flight simulation kinda like Frontier, but focusing entirely on combat and forfeiting all the factions, ranks, story mining, piracy, espionage, trade and the likes, or at least reducing to the necessary minimum. The game is entirely non-linear and features dozens of various missions, some of which are pure action-packed shooting roams against the enemy forces, while others are more tactical and offer less chaotic shooting in exchange for smaller-scale tactical battles like protection of allied ships or ground installations. There are space races too, and these are the only ones that have no combat whatsoever. Point is, there's a lot of different missions to take part in, and you can do so in any order you'd like, with some of the latter ones unlocked upon completion of the earlier. So it's not a campaign kind of a game, but more freeform, make your own adventure kind of affair. Naturally, the more missions you complete, the more engines, weapons and ship upgrades will be available, which should fuel that reward part of your brain with dopamine plenty enough to carry on playing. There's over 60 different kinds of ships that you'll meet in the game, and you'll even be able to pilot a portion of these. Not all of them though. Two features worth mentioning are smooth transitions between open space and planetary atmosphere, meaning that many of the encounters may end up being very dynamic, at least in terms of combat environments. And also wingmen, who are always at your side and you can issue simple orders to them. They may not be the smartest bunch out there, but at least they don't get in your way too much and can take a bit of a hit of you during those more intensive battles. Story-wise, in the titular 27th century, we've stopped space traveling long ago. We have teleportation, so a quick trip to a shop, to toilet or to sports event on another planet in a different star system is a breeze. Why would we fly then? Well, we would because a threat has a reason and it's still using ships. While they may not be able to teleport, they armed to the teeth and we have to have a way of facing them in battle. So, after years of zooming in and out of places in a fraction of a second, we have to relearn flying and space combat. Fortunately, we have you, so we've won already. Star Reach aka Space Federation is a sci-fi space-based real-time action strategy blending economic simulation and management with outer space combat. And it's one of those so popular these days 4X games. So, extra extermination, I'm sure that's what it means, or maybe expert extreme extraterrestrials extermination. One of the two. Anyway, Star Reach feels like a mixture of Star Control and Master of Orion that never reached the heights of either of the giants of gaming. It doesn't mean it's a bad game, as it's most definitely not, it's just not as good as it could have been. It takes place in the 21st century, and after an unsuccessful attempt of peace talks, an inner space war breaks up between the 7 alien species living in the galaxy, each trying to take control of the others. And that's also how you can win the game, because there's only 2 victory conditions. First being total annihilation of all opposing forces, so a control of all the planets in the galaxy, and second, destruction of all enemy headquarters. It's a bit limiting choice, not allowing for any peaceful or stalemate endings, but whatever, it is what it is. The only real problem that I have with it though is the marrying of action-packed player-controlled battles with real-time management parts of the game. So, you may be fighting in this intensive encounter, laying destruction to considerable in-size enemy forces, showing them who's who in the universe, outmaneuvering and outskilling them at every move, and in the same time, as you do just that, the game may decide that you should check on 2 or 3 of your colonies because something requires your attention. That lack of oversight and game's inner fight for your attention is what ultimately lets it down. Cause if these 2 were separate, I mean strategic and managerial layer from combat with first played out in turns, or at least with an active pause, then we'd have the next big hit on our hands here. I mean, it has it all. Intuitive and comfortable ship controls, planetary micro and macro management, fun and action-packed combat, diplomacy, and beautiful presentation. Star Reach was that 1 or 2 months in development away from being great. and sadly ended up decent only. Starblade is a sci-fi action-adventure game that's very similar to Silmarill's previous title, Colorado, but set in space. If you've seen that one, you'll grasp what this one's all about in an instant. If you haven't, then it's a bit of a mess, but a fun mess at least. The year is 3001 and we are no more. I mean, the Earth's gone and all the major pockets of humanity have been wiped out too, short of few small high-tech colonies hidden in vastness of space, and a one small village of ghouls. Wait a minute, wrong video, sorry. And Cephalhydras, a race of aggressive insectoids, is to blame for it all. What's worse, they're not planning on stopping and want to rid the universe of us once and for all as if we were some kind of a nasty disease. So they've genetically modified their queen brood mother to spawn legions of super warriors at an M16 pace, meaning she can give birth to them at an uncomfortable speed. So, as usual, our last hope is you. You will have to put down that game that you were playing, and I bet it was fun, board the Star Cruiser aptly named Starblade and head off to find where the alien queen is to destroy her, before she manages to rid an army that we won't be able to stop. A lot of your time in Starblade will be spent exploring the planets, gathering interesting or useful items and clues to the Brood Queen's location, and trading for supplies to upgrade your ship and arm it to the teeth. All the while fighting off various bounty hunters trying to cash in on you on land and in space, because of course that the aliens are trying to stop you at all cost. So, what is Starblade after all? Well, imagine Elite but in 2D with more emphasis on combat, and that's pretty much it. It's a good game, and I have no idea why it wasn't more widespread, but if I had to guess, I'd bet on it being a bit too repetitive. So, if anything I've said to this point sounded interesting or you enjoyed Colorado, then by all means, give it a go, you'll have a lot of fun. In any other case, it's best if you make your own mind about it. Strike 2 is a sequel to Thunderstrike and a first-person perspective 3D shooter. It's fully mouse-controlled, which takes a little time getting used to, and it's a rather demanding title. So, to fully enjoy it, you will have to master said rodent-based movement. It depicts a conflict between 4 races of sparefaring species and allows you to embark on a campaign playing as either of them. So, you can pick which to represent, choose one of a few available ships and head off to complete varied missions for the benefit of your chosen kind. Thing is, it's not always clear what you're supposed to do, but if you do focus on killing any and all enemies you encounter, and you will, a lot of them, all at once, then you will pretty much always succeed. Most battles are very arena-like in their design and decent fun for a little while. Each of the races is a bit different in characteristics, so some have stronger weapons, other faster ships and the likes. It adds a bit to the replayability if you're of the completionist type and want to experience all the content that your game has to offer. Finishing missions earns you money, which in turn can be spent to upgrade your ship or get better weapons. And there's quite a wealth of choices to pick from. Sadly, the reason why Strike 2 is on this list, unlike some of the games we've covered so far today, is rather obvious. Its simple early 3D graphics, basic sound design and repeatable nature of encounters creeps in fast, and while it's not a bad game, for me at least, its staying power is questionable at best. There's a lot of content cramped in, sure, I mean, if you'd see a list of upgrades in the shop you'd know what I mean, but honestly, the difference between them in my eyes was superficial. So the highest shot of dopamine I imagine getting from Strike 2 comes from turning it off and jumping into another, better game. Subtrade Return to Irata is a clone of earlier classic, Mule, only moved from space setting to the depths of oceans. Other than that though, it's still a sci-fi strategy and business simulation mixture for 1 to 4 players. With this new take on original released years later, naturally came some improvements, mainly in terms of presentation. So, not only Subtrade is in lush VGA color palette now, but also sounds pretty good too. Classic phases of Mule's gameplay turn are still here and nearly identical, so you'll get land, you set up production, deal with marketing and so on. Each game takes 12 rounds, so a year of in-game time, with the wealthiest player at the end of it becoming a winner. Fans of the original will no doubt appreciate that not much other than the location setting has changed, so if you've played Mule and liked it, you're not going to have to learn anything new. Everything works the same way, is near mirror-like copy of it found in original, and no new or extra features were introduced. But if you're someone who'd appreciate some kind of an evolution or expansion at least on the gameplay ideas found in a classic, new mechanics, commodities, options or anything really, then it's not gonna be a title for you, as it's a literal reskin of Mule for the new tech age. The only two differences from the predecessor, though I should really not call it that as both games came from different devs, are the AI, which is now considerably smarter, responds faster to changes on the market and plays more aggressively, and lack of tournament mode for multiplayer, which is a bit odd, but whatever, it is what it is. If you have someone to play Subtrade with, it's gonna be a blast, I promise. If you don't, then it's not bad either, just nowhere near as fun. Strike Squad is a sequel to Dev's earlier game Tiggle's Mercenaries and a very similar title to XCOM aka UFO Enemy Unknown by Microprose. So it's a squad-based tactical strategy with some role-playing elements in which you fight against invading alien forces. The difference is that it can be played both in turns or real-time. Gamer's choice. You play as a mercenary commander who starts with a spaceship of his own, few skilled and differently spec'd warriors and some starting cash. The main enemy of the game is the evil insectoid alien race of Kakistic, name I probably never pronounced correctly, and they previously destroyed your home planet along with everyone who was on it, your closed ones among them too. But just because they are traveling around the universe and annihilating life whenever they deem suitable, which is basically everywhere, it doesn't mean that you'll be able to catch them straight away without any work put in. So, first you gotta find them, and to do so you're gonna need to do a lot of planet hopping and surface exploration. So you'll visit different planets, always sending a 4-man teams to them, and given how each of the mercenaries is unique in terms of their skills, capabilities and weaponry, you'll have to juggle and mix match them to suit the challenges you'd expect them to meet on the surface. Each of the mercenaries also gets paid, just like their name would imply, so you may find yourself in a situation where you'd have to select someone subpar just to keep the books balanced and not overspend. Keeping close eye on the finances will be a recurring theme throughout most of your adventure anyway, so sooner you get used to managing your expenditures, the better. Completing objectives on planets and selling spoils of potential conflicts you'll participate in is your main means of income, so make sure to always pick up whatever you can and then carefully select what to sell and what to keep. One member of your 4-man team is a squad leader that you'll take direct control of, and the other 3 are following him and are AI controlled during encounters. You can only tell them to either engage or ignore enemies, nothing more. That said, it's worth pointing out that they do not discriminate, and if the engage option is on, they'll go for anything and anyone in range, good or bad. It's an obvious oversight and a design mistake in game's mechanic, but given how well put together the rest of Strike Squad is, it can be ignored. While the game's story is not overly deep, it's interesting, and the fact that it's rather linear means that if you keep following it, you'll never step off the beaten path and it will lead you all the way to the end. Surface Tension is a sci-fi post-apocalyptic themed first-person perspective flight combat shooter. It's set on one of Earth's colonies on Mars. Evil Corporation Lynx is searching on Mars for a substance known only as glomovine. They mine it and keep a strong hold on its supplies, effectively monopolizing it and guaranteeing itself a potentially limitless source of huge monetary gains. And it's no ordinary substance, mind you, but the only one known to be used to create a vaccine for a strange airborne disease that infected Earth and is taking its dark harvest on the planet, decimating the population at an astonishing rate. You must perform series of missions, usually made up of several smaller objectives. Dogfights are especially worth mentioning, as they're of a standout quality among others and a lot of fun. If you like those non-simulation first-person perspective shooters, that is. And Surface Tension is one of these games that will require a lot of practice to master, especially that it's rather demanding and the first few attempts may feel discouraging to some because of that difficulty. Fortunately, if you persevere, there's pretty decent fun to be had here and a whole plethora of weapons that you can use to fulfill your tasks. So cannons, beam weapons and missiles among others will make it a very enjoyable time indeed. Surface Tension's overall presentation is rather nice, sounds are decent, and the graphic engine uses a modern at the time voxel technology for landscapes with enemy sprites overlaid on top of it. Surface Tension may not be the best game in its own subgenre, but it's a pretty darn good one, and if you're a fan of Fury 3 or Terminal Velocity, you'll appreciate this one too. Taking Care of Business could be best described as Sokoban with gravity, as it's most similar to that particular classic. So, in essence, it's a puzzle game in which each level takes up a single screen and requires you to create a path to exit for the character that you control, aptly named Demolisher Dirk. Again folks, a fantastic name for an adult movie star. I'm beginning to think that the devs knew all along what they were doing. In case of Taking Care of Business though, I suppose it's a function/occupation followed by a name and not a professional pseudonym to hide one's real name, I think. Anyway, the game is composed out of 60 stages, 15 of which are accessible in an unregistered shareware version. Dirk moves only by one tile, he can jump, pick up boxes and fall from great heights unscathed. To reach the exit, you'll need to rearrange crates scattered around the level, use various tools like dynamite to blow pieces of floor for instance, bash through walls, flip switches altering stage layouts or turning off electric tiles, erect single-use ladders, fire up jump boosts and avoid any and all hazards on Dirk's way. There's a lot of variety and ways you can attempt to figure out each puzzle is what I'm saying. And while the most levels have one correct way of getting through them, some leeway in certain crates placement is acceptable a lot of time, especially in those more intricate stages. Taking care of business is an interesting game and no doubt a puzzling treat for any and all fans of the genre. But those who care not for puzzling will find very little in it, as presentation's beyond basic and there's hardly any incentive to carry on playing other than beating series of increasingly difficult mind-boggling stages. So, if you like to stretch your brain muscle, give it a go. And in any other case, approach it at your own discretion. Talisman is a fantasy adventure game that released in German and Germany only, so I've never played it cause sadly I don't speak the language. So everything I'll tell you about it is what I found online. Keep that in mind. It's a kinda point-and-click adventure, but different than most, as it feels like a mixture of standard clickers with parser games, but without typing. I know, you're confused, so am I, and the lack of video doesn't help, but there isn't any online. But let me try to explain. You can click on objects and hotspots on the screen, and an icon-based list of verbs will open up, which changes according to the object that was interacted upon. And these can be look, use, take, open, and any others you could imagine being appropriate for a particular item, as long as the game's plot/mechanics support it. The inventory is scrollable, unlimited in size, and always visible at the bottom of the screen. Most puzzles will call out for items out of it, so having direct access is a good call. Unlike regular clickers though, you can't just walk around the screen willy-nilly and can only move to clearly indicated hotspots. Which I understand, but it annoys the hell out of me anyway. And if I was to play Talisman, I'd complain about it all throughout it. And probably a little after playing too. Talisman takes place in the fantasy land of Turania. You play as Alex, and your adventure filled with mystery, magic and danger revolves around finding and obtaining of the titular talisman, a magical floating stone. All to use it to defeat the demons that killed your family 10 years prior, invading your hometown seemingly out of nowhere. So now, being a young adult and not a kid anymore, you're ready to embark on this quest of epic proportions and avenge your long-lost family. While I couldn't have played the game having no working knowledge of the language, it's gotta be noted that the presentation of it is rather spectacular. The 3D characters that are real-time rendered on static backgrounds don't woo with anything about them. The aforementioned backgrounds are beautifully painted or drawn, however, detailed and very atmospheric. Cutscenes too deserve the praise of their own, and I'm sure that learning the story from them was a blast back in the day. So, if you happen to speak German and will play the game, let me know what you think of it, and is it actually worth the score Moby Games users gave it. Tamper is probably the most unusual game in today's video and definitely one of most interest to me. It mixes business board games like Monopoly, but not really Monopoly, with high stakes, high risk, high profit world of stock trading. And what's best about it, it actually does it rather well. Up to 4 players can compete on a single system, and each of you portrays a stock trader with a goal of maximizing all of your profits. So, you'll spend a lot of time watching the stock prices move, new companies emerging and offering chances for high profits if they do well, others being taken over and dissolved or absorbed by competition. Fun! If you're sitting at your PC now munching on some chips, dropping crumbles all over your keyboard and are like, wait a minute, I've heard that before, wasn't Inside Trader similar? Well, you're not far off, it kinda was. Though it has to be said that Tamper allows for many more choices when it comes to, let's say, influencing of the stock price, and also has a board game background to it all. So that's new. Anyway, the physical location of companies on the board determines whether they can expand or acquire other smaller ones, if they can even afford it, obviously. It's a novel and a rather well-executed gameplay concept. The activity of all the company's stocks are also visually represented on the board, so that it's easier to keep an eye on how well they do in relation to one another, and predict what changes may soon be taking place. You know, to react before and cash in like a financial badass that you are. As with most multiplayer titles, playing alone is not as fun as against others. But if you manage to get anyone, even one person to dive in with you, you'll have a splash-worthy time playing in pools of stocks all day long. Oh my god, cringe. Terminal Terror is a first-person shooter made using the pie-in-the-sky 3D engine and a sequel to Lethal Tender. Lethal Tender that has, and I shit you not here, the most badass 1980s video game cover ever, despite even dropping in the 90s. Still, you gotta see it to believe it. You know what? I'll show you, it's worth it. So, is that cool or what? Landing strip haircut? Check. Thick mustache? Check. Rolled up t-shirt sleeves? Check. Big ass gun aimed at the screen? Check. Bags of money casually hanging over the tough guy's shoulder? Check. And finally, the coolest looking stoic mofo that you've ever seen? Also check. Oh, and you play the same dude in Terminal Terror, so there's that. A badass, indestructible force of nature and a mustache model Nick Hunter. In the 1990s spy circles, known only as the Mustache Hunter. I shouldn't laugh really, mustaches are unfortunately coming back. I've seen people sporting them like some kind of a fashion statement all over. They look terrible, and yet everyone wants to be a mother effing Tom Selleck again. I don't get that. Anyway, as I was saying, you're Nick Hunter, and your mission is to find and capture international terrorist Bruno Riggs, who escaped jail and aims to take the revenge on the world for his prolonged captivity. As shooters go, Terminal Terror is not great, but offers so many unseen Biden features that you just gotta stop for a moment and appreciate the creativity that went behind it. What are these, you may wonder? Well, for starters, inclusion of civilians, as additional quote-unquote targets that you should always miss at. Killing them brands you as renegade and end up with you being thrown into prison. They can be kicked, however, and a sticky goo gun seems not to trigger any negative effects either, so that's worth keeping in mind. There's also a remote inventory space in which you can keep additional items that you don't need a constant access to, but may find useful later on. Then the grenades, which can be thrown at various distances depending on how long you hold the spacebar for. Oh, and they bounce off of surfaces realistically too. Nothing special, right? Well, in 1994 it was, and basically done here first. That's not all though. Addition of rather simple but also unseen before hit detection, which depending on what part of your body is affected causes different effects. Legs slow you down or can make you sway in a particular direction while walking, arm hits affect your aim, head trauma blurs your vision, and so on. It's really cool to see such attention to detail in a game as ancient as Terminal Terror, but wait, I'm just getting started. There were also optional levels which you could, but did not have to visit, branching story adding a lot to the replayability as following playthroughs may take you through a different path, and most of all, stealth-oriented sequences along with fully working stealth meter and non-lethal weapons. I bet that you're thinking now that it's a pretty cool game, right? It is. It's just not as good at shooting parts of it as some of the more well-known titles were. So no matter how significant the innovations were made, if gameplay is not top-notch and addicting, the game ain't seen a video like this one. If despite it all, you'll wanna check out Terminal Terror anyway, I'm sure you won't feel as if it was time wasted. Terra Nova is arguably the best game in this video. Perhaps not the one I'd pick to play first, but I'm far from being objective. It's a sci-fi themed futuristic first-person perspective shooter taking place on a human colony in the Alpha Centauri system in the 24th century. You assume the role of Nikolai Aplow, a power battle armor-wearing leader of Alpha Centauri's military unit. Unit created to defend the colony from space pirates and Earth's hegemony that wants to keep the colony obedient and prosperous for the benefit of Earth only. Since Terra Nova is a squad-based shooter, you nearly always have at least a couple of AI-controlled allies with you, and you can issue tactical commands to them. They can be controlled as a group or individually, and each of them specializes in either weapons, reconnaissance, repairs, demolitions or electronics. So, keeping that in mind, you may wanna pick and choose who you'll need more for a particular mission. Missions that there's a whopping 37 of, each beginning with a detailed briefing listing all the objectives, your squad size and potential enemies present on site. The game's engine is capable of rendering detailed for the time 3D outdoor environments, simulate physics and feature procedural animation. The interface is built out of your main viewpoint through which you experience the game world, and 3 smaller screens, kinda like in earlier System Shock, and these 3 can be configured to display various useful for you at the time data. The battle armor that you're wearing comes in 3 kinds: Scout, Standard and Heavy, and they differ in how they work. Scout is light and nimble, and Heavy is slow but powerful. Normal, as you no doubt must have figured out already, is somewhere in between. There's quite a few weapons and add-ons available for the armors, and you can pick and match them to your needs, but not all are available straight away, and many will be unlocked as you progress through the campaign. The beautiful high-resolution SVGA display, with impressive weather effects and stunning graphics, paired with fast action-packed gameplay, make Terra Nova an amazing game that's worth revisiting even today. Terra Probe is a late Boulder Dash clone, and as such your goal is rather simple, and it's the execution of it that is demanding. You have to guide the ball through a series of cave puzzles, having to collect a specific number of diamonds to advance to the next stage. More often than not, more demanding than the last. While you go about it, you have to avoid any and all dangers on your way. active and passive. So, making sure that you don't drop boulders on yourself and don't release enemies that will chase you is a must. In addition to all the traps and aggressive enemies, you can also find laser, explosive and pressure crushers, and all of these often have to be utilized correctly to allow for a level completion. Naturally, you won't know any and all circumstances that they can be used in at first go, but couple of fails in and you'll be a master in knowing TerraProbe's inner mechanics. Because same as in original Boulder Dash, in TerraProbe your biggest enemy is time and yourself. First, as it's constantly ticking down, requiring you to think fast and put your plan to action even faster. And second, because you will worry about first too much to realize that sometimes slower is actually faster, and that it's better to spend the 15-20 seconds longer on planning and come up with a working solution for a whole cave for a big chunk of it at least, rather than quickly run around the stage in a nerve-wracking rush solving all environmental problems one by one. If you enjoyed Boulder Dash in the 80s, or whenever later you had a chance to play it, or just like puzzlers, TerraProbe will be a fun title to waste some hours on. But if having to work under pressure of time and use your noggin to the point that it will steam is something that actually scares the living shit out of you, and TerraProbe does not seem from what I said like fun at all, then skip it. Terran Envoy is a strategy puzzler, but not really. It's a mixture, it's odd, it's decently looking, but most importantly playable, and surprisingly so, as on paper it may not sound like anything special. But in reality, it's captivating in its loop. In Terran Envoy you play just that, an envoy to the Galactic Sector Council representing Earth. You're sent to join the Council only to learn upon arrival that for Earth to be admitted to it, you have to do some busy work proving that we qualify by finding usurper hidden within its current seats. One of the members who's secretly plotting against the betterment of all factions and wants to take over the galaxy for his species' benefit only. So, what you'll mainly be doing is traveling between 8-star systems, visiting several planets to either mine resources for trade for information or gathering and buying said information. You'll meet many different alien species, study their characteristics, their past, who their allies and enemies may be, and what their intentions really are. It's worth pointing out here that it's fundamental to take record of who's loyal to whom, not to ask the wrong question in the wrong place, so to speak, as the answer to such question may lead you astray from your investigation. After finding a culprit, or thinking that you did, cause both are as feasible, you're instructed to destroy the guilty party's planet to rid the universe of the untrustworthy. This is where the game ends and when you're finally learning if you manage to find the usurper or not. Each playthrough takes but an hour or so of your time at most and proposes a different puzzle, with hints and usurpers changing every single time too. So, while not overly long playing title, Terran Envoy is very unique and an excellent game to fire up between other longer ones or when you have just an hour to kill, as it will always feel fresh and never fail to keep you entertained. The Day 5 Assault Dragon is a sequel to the Day 4 Icarus, and it's a Korean horizontally scrolling shoot-'em-up. Despite the number in the title, it's actually a fourth game in the series that only had 2 of its parts to ever release in the West. And the story behind it is as old as the gaming itself. Aliens attack the Earth, as they do, and you have to defend it, as you do. You can pick between 2 pilots, then jump in your jet and head off to repel the intergalactic pests the best way you know how, so by spreading pain and suffering with a projectile-based method of instant delivery. One thing that has to be said about Assault Dragon is that it didn't skimp on presentation. The game looks as if it was literally ported to PC straight from the arcades without compromises to any and all of its parts, which is a compliment as it's a PC exclusive. It just looks that good. It shouldn't be a surprise though, as most Korean games that we've tackled in the series had a tendency to shine in the terms of their graphics. The sprites are large, detailed and full of color, they scale fast and smooth, and I gotta give justice where it's due, it's really impressive. And I can't tell you how many levels of parallaxing Assault Dragon has, but it looks like a bazillion at least. Whenever I try to count them, I get lost in my thoughts and daydream. There's plenty of explosions all around too, dozens of bullets flying on and off the screen, and overall there seems to be more happening all at once than one person should be able to handle. Unless that person is you, then the amount is just perfect. Your ship can use various weapons, each with their own characteristics and different power levels, so finding the one that suits you best is a must for comfortable experience. Screen-clearing bombs and satellite helper ships are an asset too, especially the earlier in the near-death scenarios, to quickly clear the screen and carry on fighting for the future of the planet. Interestingly enough, when Assault Dragon is played in co-op, both player ships can be combined into a single bigger and much more powerful one, and then one player is responsible for the movement, while the others for weapons. If you like bullet hell shooters, it's easily one of the best in its year, even if a rather punishing one at that. The Dungeons of Grillmore 2 is naturally a sequel, and I'm not only drawing the conclusion from the number in the title, I had a vision and I felt that it was. I have powers. Well, that one and the other, which is much more impressive and allows me, if I only focus on it with all my strength, to predict the past. I call it memory. Catchy, right? Feel free to quote me on that. Dungeons of Grillmore 2 is also a top-down fantasy arcade shooter / dungeon crawler. The dragon that terrorized the city of Grimlore in the first game is back, this time as a lich. Because everyone knows that slain dragons come back as liches. It's a common knowledge. This one's no ordinary lich though, he's stronger than any lich or dragon could ever be on its own. He's a being of pure evil. Or wait, no, scratch that. He's actually the second worst being made of pure evil. First would be my boss's demon of a wife. She takes the cake. Literal and proverbial. But that literal bit is a completely different story and one for another day. Dragon is back, or Lich is back actually, and we're once more left in a situation when there's no one to take him down, so it's gotta be you. This time, playing as Sir Merdimek. Not giving it too much thought, you arm yourself to the teeth and head off to the dungeon to defeat the undead Scourge. Dungeons of Grillmore 2 is sort of a mixture of generic roguelite with Gauntlet, and bits and pieces of Boulder Dash too. So, you lead a singular hero through a huge dungeon, avoiding numerous different and deadly traps, finding keys to open locked off areas, solving simple puzzles, and most of all, defeating the enemies using your bow and arrows. The game is played in real time, but many of the areas of the dungeon allow you to take much deserved breather. Some enemies cannot be killed with your weapon, however, and you have to either avoid them or find different ways of getting rid of them, like crushing them with something massive for instance. The Dungeon of Grillmore 2, despite running in high resolution, is rather unimpressive presentation-wise, so I don't expect to see you gasping at how it looks. But even if it's not something you'll be particularly impressed with, given how the gameplay loop works, it's not an issue, as the basic graphics lends themselves to this kind of a title perfectly. If you enjoyed either of the games it's based on, check it out, you may actually like it. Finkros is a Paznik variant. A Paznik variant, you say, eh? But what if I don't know what Paznik is, buddy? Is that some kind of an exotic dish? Something fishy or with weird roots, perhaps? Or maybe an airborne disease? How am I supposed to know? Well, since I've cringed my way through all that, I might as well tell you. It's basically this side-view puzzle game in which your goal is to remove all numbered or symbolic blocks. You can do it by moving them left or right, and when they connect with one or more of the same number or symbol, they all disappear. Why only left and right, you may wonder? It's cause the gravity takes part in it all, and whenever blocks are pushed off the ledge, they fall down. Naturally, there may come time when you'd have to move a particular block upwards, cause puzzling mechanics and all, and for those times there's a solution too. Levels like these feature lifts for instance, or elevators depending where you're hailing from. The whole using of various mechanism thing actually will be a reoccurring theme all throughout the game, and you'll use plenty of different ones to complete the stages. Often more than one at a time as parts of your puzzling solution. So stuff like moving platforms, disappearing ones, or conveyor belts among others will be something you'll master the usage of fast. Or you'll keep failing, either of the two. There are also traps of different kinds, so you always have to find a way to work around them. Now, it wouldn't be a particularly challenging title if it was it though. So, it's all timed, adding to the urgency of it all. Fortunately, whenever you reach a certain number of points, you're rewarded with a bomb. And it can be used to destroy an odd block if you're ever left with one unable to progress. Finkros is composed of a whopping 150 levels, split into 5 groups, so if you enjoy games that get your noggin going, it's definitely a treat. The Never-Ending Story 2, the arcade, should be called the Never Releasing Story 2, the Cancellation. It would be better for all, us gamers and the devs who had to work on this disappointment. But whatever, it's out, the milk spilled, we can't do anything about it, and by God we are going to cover it here, even if it's not worth it. The first Never-Ending Story, the movie, was great. Well, at least in the eyes of a kid I was when I saw it. The second, not so much. But I'll spare you the details. Point is, same thing happened with the games. So first was decent, and this second just is. Anyway, you're naturally playing as Bastian, a teen hero of the movies, who are once more called by the Child Empress to save the Land of Dreams, Fantasia. And while it all sounds epic and grandiose, at least for kids it should, what you'll be actually doing in the game is anything but. Your task, should you collect enough strength to fire up this third and play it, will be to either outrun the giants or push them off the ledges, all in a side-scrolling platforming setting. With every more boring than the last level completed, you will be rewarded with a couple of pages of the story to push the plot forward. Now, it's hardly a reward reading walls of text in a video game, but given how terrible the rest of Never-Ending Story 2 the arcade is, this is actually a highlight, as it's at least a bit interesting, unlike anything else about it. What's worse, even the graphics don't save the game. They're nicely animated, I'll give them that, but look bland and grey-brownish, and sound design is no better. if no one's making you play this game, don't. And if they are, ask them if there's anything else you could be punished with instead, like nail pulling or finger breaking, cause they do seem a tad better than this. The Lost Tribe is one of those edutainment types of games. So you know, tools made for teaching under a guise of entertainment. More often than not, they're just a nightmare to run and go through, either lacking in the gameplay, presentation or story, or most of the time all three of these. Now, generally speaking, in most cases I'd not include such a title here as they are a waste of space, but this one is surprisingly fun. It's a survival management and simulation mixture that's very similar to Oregon Trail. Yep, you heard that right, another of those actually good edutainment titles. The background of it all goes as follows. A volcano erupted, I know, terrible. What's worse, guess whose village was built in close proximity and is now no more. Yep, yours. So you gather up all of the survivors and head off to find a better place to settle in. Preferably one that's safe and rich in fauna and flora. So not Australia, cause as much as it's beautiful, all living creatures and plants there somehow evolved to kill humans. Was it a coincidence or Earth telling us that we're pests? It's hard to tell, but it crosses off the continent of the list of places to lead your tribe to. Fortunately, it's not all lost, and there's a rumored ancestral seat, a place that's seemingly only mere weeks away, one full of life and a paradise on Earth. Your objective in the Lost Tribe is to keep a tribesman happy, well-fed and content, and find the promised land before the winter sets in. There are 6 routes that you can take to get to your goal. The map that you travel on is hexagonal and top-down, making the Lost Tribe look like a strategy, which it's obviously not. You can only travel 1 hex per turn and choose what you'll do during it too. And it can be hunting, practice spear throwing, rest, pray and so on. The pace of the travel is up to you too, and the faster you go, the faster you may reach your goal, but also are more prone to injuries and use up more resources. Naturally, there are tons of various random events, good and bad, and most fun comes from having to deal with them. A successful game ending with you getting to the promised land will require a lot of careful planning and keeping a good balance of how your available resources are used up. With great presentation, stellar gameplay and an interesting idea, The Lost Tribe is not only an excellent edutainment title, but a pretty good game too. Is it as good as Oregon Trail? I'm sure you didn't expect to hear it, but yeah, it is. Perhaps better even. It's just not as relatable and much less known, so never gained any real traction. DOS version of The Punisher is unlike any other I've played. It's nothing like the arcade game where you would just go from left to right beat-em-up style, breaking jaws and kicking shins left and right, not the terrible Amiga Operation Wolf clone that had as much to do with Punisher as I do with Taylor Swift. I mean, we both supposedly singing in the shower, so there's a connection. It can't be denied. No, this game is different than all others. And it's a mixture of genres, blending action, adventure and even bits and pieces of strategy for a concoction of comic book inspired fun like no other. Kingpin is back, and in hiding, doing his usual Kingpin business, so earning money by any and all means, as long as they're profitable and fast. So you know, extortion, bribes, drugs, gambling, kidnappings, killings, out-of-date bubblegum sales, the likes. He's dipping his fat hairy toe in all of these. Now, usually, being the tough mofo that the Punisher is, he'd walk in Kingpin's lair, guns blazing, going through his goons one after another until their bodies would form a pile tall enough to reach the Kingpin himself. And you know, as bloody as it is and appropriate for our anti-hero, it's only feasible if you know where your target is. So, our buff mountain of muscles has no other choice than seek outside counseling, in this particular case, an informer. And he's not a man that shares what he knows willingly. So, to secure the Kingpin's location, our always angry vigilante has to come up with a half of a meal, and pronto. And he aims to do just that. The game's mainly top-down and sees you controlling Frank Castle all around New York, entering buildings, known criminal locations, and taking them out, one building at a time, like a deranged cleaner freeing the streets of NYC from the scum that pollutes it. Each of these done brings in money, and that's how you'll grind it. Oh, naturally, the underground is not blind to the temperature changes on the street, and when things turn hot, they send assailants to help Frank with his early retirement. Usually when he's driving somewhere. I mean, imagine being Frank Castle, right? Minding your own business, just getting rid of the criminals all day long until you get tired, right? You still with me? So, when you eventually do, you naturally want to grab a staple of NYC cuisine, pizza, as one does. And on your way to get to that goddamn pepperoni, someone starts unloading magazines after magazines of high caliber rounds your way. And all that is just not cool, man. What is though, is the game. It's not without its small faults here and there, but they're nothing you can't just overlook, and I think that it overall managed to capture the spirit of the comic book in its simple yet stylish EGA presentation perfectly. So, if you like Punisher graphic novels, check the game out, it's worth it. The Quivering is a humorous horror first-person perspective point-and-click adventure game that takes place in a fictional town of Worthy Hollow. Olivetti Frankenstamp and his assistant were creating a so-called Goal Cube, a device capable of capturing and containing any and all evil it is used on. A rather interesting idea, kinda reminiscent of those portable ghost traps from Ghostbusters, but better named. A noble plan, but one that also backfired and opened a portal to the Dimension X. Naturally, all manner of monsters started pouring out of it, but what was weird was that they seemed organized and not just chaotically popping up here and there. It's because they were led by the evil demon Big D. Now, if there's no joke here coming to your mind, I salute you. I am fighting with all my force not to make one, and you know how bad my jokes are. Anyway, Big D transformed both the scientist and his helper into a giant tentacle monster and set off to take over the world. You play as Spad, Olivetti's nephew, and you take it upon yourself to turn Olivetti and his assistant back to their original selves and find a way to defeat the Big D. Perhaps it could be done with the Big V, but since I'm not the one who wrote the game, you can expect something much less obvious and possibly funnier to be the answer to this problem. Most of the puzzles in Quivering are inventory and conversations based, with some action sequences scattered between them to keep the gameplay loop fresh and engaging. The Quivering is fun, but it commits one of the biggest, in my eyes at least, adventuring sins. It features instant death mechanics. I didn't like it in Sierra's games, I'm sure as hell not liking it in any other either. That's a me problem though, and if it doesn't bother you too much, don't let me sway you from trying to take on the Big D out. Yep, it was to be predicted, I couldn't help myself. Oh well. The Quivering, the Summoning Jesus. The creativity was not lost on the game designers back then. Anyway, The Summoning is a top-down isometric view fantasy action role-playing, and a sequel to 1990s Darkspire. An evil overlord Shadow Weaver, whose name makes him sound like a funeral dress as peddler, is ready to conquer the world and rid it of all good that's there. As circumstances dire, as it was predictable, because whenever you've nothing to do, your mere presence, nay, your existence at your power level and skill, invites a challenge, my dear viewer. And so he does. Challenges you, that is. By scheming to take the world for himself, he effectively sends you a message saying that he's the top dog now, the alpha, even better, the omega chat, and that there's no place for you here anymore. Now, knowing you don't take a challenge like that lightly, and will head off to defeat the evil. If not to save us, then at the very least to make sure that all the future usurpers know what the potential consequences for such actions are. The Summoning is composed out of 40 levels deep dungeon, filled to the brim with different monsters that you have to go through to eventually face the Shadow Weaver himself. There are 4 kinds of weapons, wrenched, swords, spears and axes, and 4 kinds of magic too, and all of these improve upon use. Magic, in fact, uses gestures for casting, which may have sounded like a neat idea back then, but today it feels like an extra unnecessary busywork if I'm to be honest. The dungeon levels are split into thematic groups with different types of monsters holding different parts of the dungeon, and since we're on the dungeons, you'll not only be cutting down enemies there, keeping their population in check, so equaling 0, but we'll also get to solve numerous puzzles, and meet many NPCs characters that may offer you additional side quests. A little hint from me, at some point you may find a two-hand sword called the Warmonger. And when you do, make sure to switch to its stat, because while it will feel lacking initially, the more you use it, the better it will be, and eventually might become the most powerful magical weapon in the game. The Summoning is fun, there's no doubt about that, and a game worth recommending, but, and I'm only saying it so that we're clear here, it's nowhere near the quality of the giants of the genre. The Taking of Beverly Hills is a mediocre tie-in to similarly unspectacular movie of the same title. How bad of a movie it was? Well, given it had a budget of $25 million and didn't even manage to bring one of these millions back in the takings, should tell you everything you need to know about it. The game is an action-adventure and it's not much better as it adapts the movie's story in an interactive format. It takes place in Beverly Hills and sees you controlling both a football player Boomer Hayes and his girlfriend Laura Sage. Robert Masterson, LA Football's team coach, is leading a group of robbers who want to steal the priceless Boriselli fresco and kill one of our 2 protagonists, Boomer. In the same time, Boomer aims to stop the robbery and bring Masterson to justice, all the while avoiding ex-caps and a hired tag Benitez who are working for Masterson. You know what would be funny here? Like in a way cringe funny? If he was not Robert Masterson, but Danny Masterson. If all that sounded stupid, convoluted and overthought for no reason in particular, then you have a proof that both game and a movie are not worth experiencing. Playing as Boomer and Laura, switching between them, you have to recreate the terrible events of the original and somehow not die from indulging yourself in such a lowbrow material. The game uses 3 different viewpoints depending on the scene and can be top-down, side view and first-person perspective. but what it should really be is turned off and swapped for something good, or better yet, never installed on your hard drive in the first place, which fortunately is not something you'll be far from doing when you play it, turning it off that is, because all the cheap devs you'll get to experience in it will no doubt discourage you from carrying on. The ultimate Tapan Kaiki is a freeware top-down shooter, and one that isn't trying to be anything else. It's not inventing overcomplicated plots, it's not trying to motivate you to play it any other way, it doesn't seek a reason to have you do what you have to do in it, it just is. And even that only to have you release some of that bottled up throughout the day's stress, in quick and efficient way. So, imagine something like Postal, but top-down and completely devoid of the background story, because it doesn't really need one. All you have to do from the moment you launch Ultimate Tapan Kaiki till when you had enough of it that is kill as many nondescript enemies as possible, and see them turn into puddles of red goo. All that with weapons that you'll find or purchase in the stores. There's quite a few different ones too, from pistols through mines and grenades all the way to the flamethrowers and C4 explosives among others. Kills reward you with cash, which then in turn can be spent between the levels. The game is split into few episodes, each containing around 10 missions, well, 10 killing grounds I should say really, but the objective hardly ever changes. It also features a simple to use level editor downloadable directly from the developer's website, considerably extending game's potential replayability. So, can a brutal, needlessly gory and shallow game as Ultimate Tapan Kaiki be fun? Hell yeah it can! It's perhaps not one to talk to friends about after playing, it's not one you'll remember when eating dinner, going to the movies or shopping, but it's definitely one that you will instantly jump into after having a particularly bad day at work or an interaction with a random, aggressive and loud stranger. Because as a stress reliever, and a free one at that, it's great. Thor's Hammer is a first-person perspective fantasy-themed shareware shooter with some very superficial RPG elements. And when I say very superficial, I mean you'll need a magnifying glass and a whole little detective set to find any proof of its inclusion, but we'll get to that later. So, after years of peace and prosperity, the proverbial shadow of the great evil befell upon your homeland, signifying the dawn of the dark times. To change the future and prevent the catastrophe from happening, a hero must once again rely on legendary Thor's Hammer. As per usual, that hero is you. It should come as no surprise cause, as we know from Marvel's movies, only Thor, Captain America and you can hold it. Thor's Hammer is composed out of 3 episodes: the trial, the journey and the battle. Pretty self-explanatory if you ask me. And only the first is available in the shareware version. The weapons that you'll get to use are mainly of melee kind and spells, they're nothing special or extraordinary like Thor's Hammer, but can be upgraded at least to keep that feeling of progression going. So, running in a large room like a deranged barbarian with a huge axe and death in your eyes, putting down groups of zombies in rage-filled psychosis is nothing special, and something that you'll be doing quite often. Well, often as in each of the episodes, not often as in all the time. Because as FPSs go, Thor's Hammer has surprisingly few enemies. In fact, I'd risk saying that it's a decent first FPS for someone who doesn't play games in the genre and is not dead set on weapons having to be rifles, as it's easy enough for anyone to enjoy and complete. Especially that it features an auto map, so they won't get lost in it. And it's a feature that many much bigger commercial titles didn't have. Enemies are quite varied and anything, from different kinds of humanoids, so soldiers, knights and wizards, all the way to zombies, bats and vampire-like creatures that attack with their eyes. I don't know how to explain it better, they shine their eyes at you and it hurts. Inside. It's like they're judging you. It's weird. You don't earn experience or money in Thor's Hammer, but you get to find and talk to NPCs for hints, so that's the aforementioned RPG elements. Thor's Hammer is not great, but it's not terrible either, so it's up to you to decide if you wanna play it or not. The Walls of Bratok is one of the best shareware turn-based DOS RPGs. No, really, it is. Surprisingly good in fact. Its depth, story, gameplay mechanics, all were of the highest quality, and only the graphics were an indicator that it was not a game supported by a large publisher and done by someone with heaps of imagination and will to see it through. But it's hardly graphics that make or break the game, and we should know, because we mainly talk about old games here. So, don't let the 1980s presentation fool you, Walls of Bratok is great. It takes place on an island of Bratok, which is consumed by conflict. Conflict that hardly anyone remembers the genesis of. You play as a hero who's been led to the island by a premonition that came to him in a dream, saying that he's the one, nay, the only one who can prevent the bloodshed and save Bratok. The game world is rather huge for shareware release, featuring 10 multi-level cities, villages and keeps, over 30 huge dungeons filled with different monsters to the brim, as in with them spilling to the outside world too. The plot is rather interesting as well and features more than one twist, so it's quite fun to follow and experience. If you're looking at the game and thinking, "Hey there, buddy boy," though why would you call me buddy boy, I don't know. I don't mind, let's make that clear, but also don't understand it. Anyway, "Hey there, buddy boy, I've seen it before, isn't it one of those maximum games? I mean ultimum games? I mean Ultima games?" Well, no, but also kinda yes. While The Walls of Bratok had nothing to do with Richard Garriott or Origin Systems directly, it was inspired by the classic Ultima series. And as inspirations go, this one paid off, and The Walls of Bratok is very solid and well put together. Also, share version was basically a full game, short of few small extra bits and pieces that were totally unnecessary to complete the game. So there's that. If you like RPGs, get it. Fret is a top-down sci-fi arcade action shooter and easily one of the best shareware games of 1995. Humans have always been dreaming of space. We thought about it long before we had planes, before we landed on the moon, before Twitter was renamed to X. It waited on our imaginations, fueling it with ideas and hopes for the mankind. So, establishing of the colony city Astral on a far-off mineral-rich asteroid was a huge achievement, and we were happy. The dream was fulfilled, right? First step and all. Well, quite unfortunately, the colony city was overtaken by the aggressive and deadly aliens, who came there and took it. Yep, just like that. No pleases, no thank yous, no kiss my asses, nothing. They just took it. Now, if you've ever seen a random gym goer's Instagram feed, you should know to never give up, to follow your dreams, to keep on fighting, to never stop never stopping, and most importantly, to never ever skip the leg day. Wiser words have never been spoken. So you and few white coat and glasses wearing buddies of yours took the coats down, grabbed the nearest guns you could find, fixed your glasses and decided to take the colony back. Fret is a super fun top-down arcade shooter for up to 3 players, which if I was to compare it to anything else you'd know or heard of, I'd say that it's most similar to Alien Breed games, but with bigger levels, full 360 degrees rotation and fog of war. And it's that small and seemingly insignificant change, fog of war, that makes a whole lot of difference and keeps you on the edge of your seat constantly, ready to shoot, cause you never know from where and how many aliens will pop out. Also regular enemies too. But you know that they will. You know, it's edited, cause originally I said that you never know how many aliens would poop out, which may not be correct, but if you imagine it, it's way more fun than whatever I came up here with. Fortunately, you're not armed with staple guns and get to pick up various bonuses and money for killing aliens, which then can be spent between the levels in the store for a wide choice of deadly firearms and explosives. Fret may not be the best looking or sounding game in today's video, but I'd risk saying that it's most likely the most fun, if you play it with others, that is. Being as ignorant as I am and not knowing Dutch or willing to use Google Translate, I can only assume that our next game is pronounced or something similar. Okay, that's not good enough and offensive to people of the green country, so let me try again. Tazinhet Milio. Better? Well, that's the best I can do, I tried. It's gotta count for something, right? Anyway, the game is kinda like Oregon Trail, but without the family members, without the dangers and with no travel whatsoever. In fact, all the travel you'll be doing is between different rooms of your house and the yard. Sounds odd? Well, it's an edutainment kind of a game, so you can't expect heaps of action or deep multi-layered plot full of twists, turns and cliffhanger moments. Oh, it's gotta be pointed out that it only ever came out in Dutch, so I've never played it myself. But if you did, please let me know if it's any good. Anyway, it's all about ecology and living your eco-friendly life. So you'll be performing series of tasks in and around the house, like controlling the radiators, cleaning, throwing out the trash, taking showers, naturally conserving water, going to the bathroom and doing laundry. So, exactly like Sims, but all the least fun parts of Sims. Whenever you're doing any of the oh so exciting tasks, you'll be asked environmental in nature questions. And at the end of the week, you are evaluated on how well you've conserved energy and how much you've helped with saving of the environment. The idea is interesting, the questions surely explain the edu in the edutainment, but is it worth checking out in the end? Honestly, I don't know. Oregon Trail was, so maybe this has some fun factor there too, hidden between recycling of beer cans and composting yard leaves in a language may as smooth as baby's bottom brain never grasp. You make up your own mind about it. Remember Wipeout and how fun it was? Also fast, hella fast, and action-packed? Remember? What a game. Well, Thunder Offshore is like that. only divided in half and takes place on water and other liquids and not on regular tracks. So half the fun, half the speed, half the action and half of presentation. If you keep in mind how amazing Wipeout was, it means that Thunder Offshore has got to be pretty decent at least, right? And yeah, it actually is. It's a futuristic motorboat arcade racer built out of 15 circuits in water, lava, acid and other unpleasant liquid substances. It features different boats to choose from, all with their unique power, handling and looks, and over 10 weapons to lay destruction to your opponents. Anything from lasers to torpedoes. But beware, cue the menacing music here, editor. Thank you, you're not the only one versed in use of such gear, and opposing racers will no doubt try to take you out too. The sensation of speed is not Thunder Offshore's strongest suit, which is a bit disappointing in a racer, and while the tracks look nice and all, you never feel as if you were speeding at an incredible pace. So it's a bit easier game than Wipeout. One thing that is rather annoying would be how your motorboat behaves whenever it collides with anything or floats over solid ground. It just feels odd and breaks the immersion entirely, looking as if all the gravity failed and was not a constant but alternating with each micro difference in terrain height. It's not game breaking in any way, but definitely very annoying. Thunder Truck Rally is an arcade 3D monster truck racer. And as much as I don't care about the sport, it was made by Reflections for Psygnosis, so folks who made both Destruction Derby games, so you know, it pretty much guaranteed a quality there. I mean, when have we ever heard of the company that made amazing, like genre-defining games for a while and then stopped by releasing a terrible, awful abomination of a title, Bethesda? I meant no one in particular, really. Anyway, TTR, which I will call it from this point onward, saving like a second or two at most each time I do, and just barely making up for all the time lost explaining it here and now, is actually pretty fun. It features all the standard for the races game modes of Championship, which is like your career of monstering and tracking, then the time trial, practice and multiplayer. There is also a separate car crashing competition, but it also pops up from time to time in Championship as a bonus, and this one's all about fun. And points, but mostly fun. There are 9 different tracks to pick from and they're all different in stats, but it's your typical spread between stronger but slower and faster but less fragile, with all the others in between. Well, I'm obviously grossly oversimplifying as there's also acceleration and turning there, but you get what I mean, right? Sure you do, you're you. So like one of 5 people in the universe with IQ over 9000. You're so smart in fact that when you begin thinking about something, like really giving it your best, getting them brain cells working, your brain goes at it so hard that the temperature in the room that you're in instantly jumps up a few degrees. That's you. But let's get back to our game. There are 2 types of races in TTR. First takes place in an open arena where you have to race from point to point in the fastest possible time. And there are also circuits, which are on fixed tracks that cannot be escaped or the borders crossed in any way. In this, you aim to complete the circuit as fast as possible. Overall, TTR is a rather fun game, especially for the fans of its specific offshoot of the racing genre, so why is it in this video at all? Well, Monster Truck Madness came out 2 years prior, and its successor did in 1998, same as TTR, and simply put, they were much better games. Tiger Road is a fantasy-themed horizontally scrolling beat-em-up that originated in the arcades and then was ported to other systems of the time, DOS being one of them. You play as Li Wong, a warrior monk who has to rescue children kidnapped by the evil Emperor Yuken. You start with a short-range axe, which is not terrible in itself but can eventually be switched to either faster but lower-range spear or slower but longer-ranged spiked bow. All of them have their ups and downs, and most of them can be upgraded by picking up POW icons, as in power-up and not prisoner of war. Even more so, breaking golden statues reveals other power-ups which can be different useful things, so stuff like stopping time, increasing your life meter, or even screen clearing of all the monsters among others. Most levels scroll horizontally and throw enemies at you from both sides, but some also have small arcade challenges incorporated straight into their design, like a collapsing bridge where you need to jump over falling platforms not to fall down into a spiky pit, and the likes. You won't get bored in Tiger Road is what I'm saying, and going through the game will definitely feel as if you were progressing, even if it will be incredibly short progress. All because DOS version is not only considerably shorter than the arcade original, consisting of only few stages culminating with the final boss fight, but also uses EGA presentation in one of the worst ways I've seen, with colors mixed in a way that it looks as if someone just gave a 5-year-old a set of colors and told to color the game in to his/her heart's content. and whatever you wanna say, most 5-year-olds are not artists. Anyway, so that you don't think I'm done complaining, scrolling is another bug of problems that should never have been opened. And it's as choppy as you would have expected from a title that got close to no playtesting at all. Not saying that it's the case, but it seems very feasible. Overall, Tiger Road in the arcades was really fun and action-packed. When played on DOS, Tiger Road is. Yup, that is precisely how I wanna end talking about it. Tilt is a rather fun action puzzler which feels like a mixture of Marble Madness, Pipe Mania and one of those games where you slide square pieces to form a complete image. Your goal is to get the ball from start to the end, and you do so by navigating often quite convoluted maze, moving a ball through it. It's hardly ever a maze that's complete from the get-go, so you also have to rearrange board's layout by creating a path for the ball, sliding tiles to construct a feasible path for it. As you do just that, like a boss I must add, using but a fraction of your mental processing powers, you also have to collect randomly appearing pickups and avoid any and all obstacles like magnets, red buttons, stop signs, holes and other traps. Naturally, the levels are timed, so completing them as fast as possible is not only advisable, but also influences your end level bonus. Tilt is pretty fun, especially if you like puzzlers. And the fact that it comes with the included level editor makes it even more long-lasting and enjoyable than it would have been otherwise. There's also a simultaneous cooperative 2-player mode, but I've not had a chance to play it, so I can't vouch for how fun it is. I can only imagine that with one player controlling the ball and the other working on the board, it can be hella fun. I mean, most multiplayer games are, right? Time Bandit is a Gauntlet clone with some simple text adventure elements here and there, scattered over its rather robust 16 worlds, split into 240 individual levels. Yup, it's a pretty big and fun one. The title is not misleading. The time travel theme is in the forefront of the gameplay, and your nameless bandit protagonist visits 16 different lands throughout the time, trying to find and grab as much loot as possible, eventually working your way to saving the universe too. Because of course that there's hidden plot there. The worlds are rather different and interesting too. So you'll get to travel to places like a ghost town, medieval arena, wrecked spaceship and a bomb factory to name a few. Now, I did mention that Time Bandit is similar to Gauntlet, so apart from treasures, there are also keys to open locked off areas and a lot of enemies to defeat. They are quite varied in their design, but in Time Bandit's spiritual ancestor style, also pretty easy to kill. Every now and then you will encounter a NPC or a computer console, and this will offer some superficial interaction possibilities and some simple tasks to perform. Time Bandit, while very similar to Gauntlet, is also quite different from it too. So it's a genre bender type of a game. And as such, it's fun to experience and even more so to play with a friend. Not to mention the epic title, which could be a base for a decent temporal heist badly written book with an unsatisfying ending or a graphic novel with terrible art. The possibilities are endless. In the near future, an advanced computerized combat simulation was created for the use of military, with aim of teaching the participants various different combat forms found throughout human history. This stupid-ass plot must have made sense in 1996. Today, it's not even good enough to base a B-movie on, not to mention a game. But don't let the shallow story discourage you from playing. Time Commando is not a bad game. One of the simulation's developers is against the general idea of the project and seeks to destroy it. And what's a better way to do it than with a computer virus? It's simple, it's clean, and most importantly, fast to pull off. The idea is sound, but as per usual, when something seems like a given, something else went astray and the virus mutated and created a dimensional vortex that threatens to swallow the entire world. You play as Stanley Opar, a member of the so-called SAFE, so Special Action for Virus Elimination Unit, who enters the vortex with a goal of destroying a virus before the universe is destroyed. Stanley Opar travels into 8 different time periods: prehistoric, Roman, feudal Japan, medieval, conquistador, Wild West, modern wars, and future. Each of those eras is thematically entirely different, featuring unique enemies and sets of weapons. Time Commando is a 3D action adventure in which you control a full 3D polygonal character against 3D enemies in a pre-rendered 3D looking but not really being environments. It plays kinda like Alone in the Dark, but features many more open areas and is tad more action-packed with a lot of combat on the forefront of everything that you'll be doing. Stanley has 3 attacking moves and a block, and while it may not seem like a lot, they change depending on the weapons that you use. And part of the challenge comes from picking the right weapon to use against a particular enemy. You can increase the size of your life bar by in-game found pickups and raise the time limit that's constantly ticking down by depositing picked up while playing computer chips into a special orb pools that are found in the levels every now and then. As early 3D polygonal games on pre-rendered backgrounds go, Time Commando is good. I'm not a big fan of pre-rendered backgrounds, I'm sure I've complained about them in at least a dozen videos to date, but I can overlook them here as Time Commando is pretty decent. Timegate Knight's Chase is a 3D action adventure built upon Alone in the Dark's engine, and the same as the original title using the tech, it mixes combat with puzzling for its gameplay loop. You play as William Tibbs, a young American law student in Paris who is mysteriously summoned throughout time by the last of the Knight Templar to face the overwhelming evil in the form of Wolfram, an evil Dark Lord. And since Wolfram, being as bad entity as he is, also somehow, for whatever the reason, decided to kidnap your modern time girlfriend Juliet. If I had to draw a guess here, I'd say that it's no doubt for perverse reasons. With her gone, you really don't need any extra incentive to agree to help the Knight Templar in bringing Wolfram's reign to an end. So, you jump back in time, as one does in Paris, straight into 1329, to serve some serious ass-whooping and save the world once more. You know, as you tend to do at least 3-4 times whenever I release a video. While the combat doesn't happen all too often, it suffers from the same issues it did in Alone in the Dark, namely automatically switching camera. To combat the character getting stuck behind the foreground objects, Timegate makes sure to have its backgrounds drawn in a way that would prevent them from covering large chunks of the screen, which may be more of a band-aid type of a solution rather than the medicine, but it helps a little. Puzzles are a definite highlight of it all, especially that those that require your noggin to work are not too demanding, so everyone should be able to enjoy them and complete the game. Environmental ones though? Well, these are something else. Many of them are extremely difficult. Dodging lasers or following the footsteps are not as fun as they may have been if the game was in real full 3D with a camera following you directly from behind. Still, overall, as a package, Timegate is pretty darn cool, and if you enjoy action-adventure games, it should be somewhere on top of your to-play list of titles. Oh, and don't expect the Templar story to grow into something bigger or more detailed though, it serves here only as a background. Kinda like my talking in this video does, it's the background to the footage and not vice versa. Time paradox is what happens whenever my boss's wife ascends from the depths of hell and comes to work. Cause whenever she's not there, time seems to fly by as if I was having fun, and as soon as she arrives, it stops and fails to move at all, freezing anything and everything but the pain of her fiery burning personality. So, whether she stays there for an hour or 4, it feels like infinity and drags forever. Plus, she sucks out life out of anyone she comes in contact with. So when she's ready to leave, leaving a trail of burnt ash and stench of sulfur behind, all of us in the office are shriveled, dried up shadows of our former selves, just eyeing the hands of a clock hoping that they would start moving. Honestly, I'd rather have a week-long diarrhea than have her come to work 2 days in a row. That's how terrible of a demon she is. Anyway, Time Paradox that we'll actually tackle in today's video is a point-and-click adventure game that released only in Europe. I kinda get why too, it's pretty short, not too difficult, and with a rather blunt and predictable story. That said, fans of point-and-clickers would probably find a way to enjoy it anyway, especially that it can be completed in 7-8 hour stops. And I'm gonna blow your mind here. I bet that this could be cut down to 4-5ish hours, if the main character, a woman named Kay, would move at the normal pace. Instead, she seems to be tiptoeing her way around the game world, taking her sweet time. Anyway, like I said, you play as Kay, and she's on a hell of a ride through time, from prehistoric era through medieval times all the way to the present day. All to save Merlin from evil witches Morgana Le Fay's clutches. Time Paradox's presentation is not bad. I mean, it's definitely not 1996 good, but it's also not something that would detract you from playing. It looks a bit dated as originally it was supposed to release in 1993, but something happened and delayed it. What was the reason for the delay? I don't know, and frankly I don't care either, so if adventure games are your absolute #1 genre, check it out. Otherwise, picking nearly any other game, preferably something from LucasArts or Sierra, will be a better choice. Time Race is a time race. No, really, it is. There are folks in the top half of the screen going from left to right, and they represent the time that you have to complete each stage. Initially, they're prehistoric cavemen, you know, at Flintstones tech level, so clubs, rocks, the likes, but as you power through the game, their development level will change too, and they will progress through the ages along with you. They're just a glorified timer though, and only serve as a background to all the puzzling, so other than aesthetically pleasing and as a clock, they serve no function at all. Anyway, Time Race is a puzzler, in which you must connect triangles with other triangles of the same color by moving and rotating them. And when they do, connect that is, they disappear. When you connect different colored triangles, nothing happens. But when you eventually fill them up to create squares of mixed colors, the whole square will disappear along with the game board piece underneath, effectively raising the difficulty level by leaving you less space to work with. Time Race may not be the most innovative or fun puzzler out there, but it's decent, and the time spent at it having your noggin steaming will most definitely not feel wasted. The presentation is rather nice, even if not great. The characters move slowly and jerkily, but that's not down to their quality, but rather the fact that they serve as a timer, and shouldn't move too fast, leaving you with enough time for playing. There's 30 levels in the game, which given the source material seems plenty enough, and I don't think that you'll be craving anymore after going through these. Seven-year-old Tom and his mother are on holidays in Scotland. Fun, right? He marvels at the beauty of the land, nature and wilderness in the deep north, and she appreciates different kinds of whiskies, sampling any and all she can lay her hands on. They have fun, is what I'm saying. And one day, when they're touring an old castle, one with toilets that would have all the poo fall out from the sides of the castle, and corridors lit up with torches, and they're having the time of their lives, one sober, the other not so much, suddenly, and out of nowhere, an evil sorcerer appeared and kidnapped Tom's mother. Now, what a sorcerer was doing in 1990 in Scotland, I do not know. Perhaps he missed the last train to Hogwarts, but he's there and he took the mother. Tom, being a young lad and knowing very well what old and wrinkly dudes do to young and slightly tipsy single mothers, decided to save her. Fortunately, right on time it seems, a ghost of brave Sir Reginald Arrow appears and vouches to lend him a hand. One would think that's very nice of him and that he truly was a knight like no other even years after his own death, but that's hardly the case here. It seems that evil sorcerer kidnapped Sir Reginald's beloved 500 years prior to sacrifice her to Lucifer, and it's just a perfect opportunity for Reginald to avenge her. So he assumes the corporeal form, and along with Tom they head off on a quest of epic proportions to stop the sacrifice ritual and save Tom's mother before it's too late. Tom and the Ghost is an action-adventure platformer in which you control Sir Reginald with Tom closely following by. Reginald can walk, jump, duck, fight, collect, combine and use items. Tom does jack shit. I mean, he's a kid and you can't expect much of him, but he's there, keeping you company at least. Oh no, wait, he does something after all. Yep, he's annoying. Cause whenever he gets exhausted, you gotta feed him burgers and milkshakes to fuel that lactose and gluten-powered farts, and when he's upset, you need to give him his teddy bear to cheer him up. So yeah, not only you need to save Tom's mother all alone, you also have to keep an eye on him, don't lose him, kill or avoid any and all enemies you may encounter, and take revenge for your beloved and sorcerer's other victims. I complain, and the fact is that Tom and the Ghost is actually pretty fun, so if you like platformers, don't skip it. It's a hidden gem among them. Top Hat Willy originally released on the Amiga in 1994 as a homage to old-time 8-bit classic Jet Set Willy, and then was ported to DOS in 2002. It's a flick-screen arcade platformer in which we play Willy and have to collect all the trash in and around the mansion. Why does he have to do it? Hard to tell. He's not a janitor, that's clear. He is, after all, wearing a top hat, so maybe he's a magician looking for something he'd lost in the mansion. The reason is irrelevant. Trash is scattered everywhere and makes this otherwise cozy mansion and its grounds look rather run down. So you speed around the stages, collecting it all. Naturally, touching any of the enemies, spikes or falling from great heights causes you to lose a life. And there's only 9 of these. Yes, only. So beware. Be vigilant, be careful and be precise. The enemies that you'll be avoiding come in such a spread of forms, from rolling razors through bunny rabbits to TV sets even, that I question Willy's sanity. He's either completely off his rockers or at least under the influence of strong psychoactive substances. One should wonder whether to feel for him or be jealous, but I've yet to meet someone who's as high as he is and feels that cleaning up is what's on the agenda. Anyway, Top Hat Willy's presentation is simply put terrible. It looks and feels 8-bit, and while there's definitely a certain charm to it, by 2002 it wasn't very appealing. If you enjoyed ZX Spectrum's original or Being Punished, then by all means, check Top Hat Willy out, it's quite fun, in a slightly masochistic kind of a way. Towers Lord Bunny's Deceit is a single-player first-person perspective real-time RPG, very similar in its presentation and mechanics to much better, deeper and more demanding Eye of the Beholder games. As you and your companions travel to Era 2s to help in the war against evil Sargon, your ship encounters a magical storm, and somehow a 6-foot hole is ripped in it. And as it's about to sink, an onboard wizard, because of course the ship has its own wizard, held the waters back using his powers until you could land on the nearest island. As it turns out, you landed on an island known only as the Land of Towers. Why is it called that way? Well, the beautiful land is chock full of them. Whichever way you turn, there are towers. You know, Tower of Dreams, Tower of Destiny, Tower of Power, Tower of Undercooked Steaks, Tower of Old Floppy Disks, Tower of Disappointing Outcomes, and even DHV Tower. What's that? Well, it stands for Department of Horse Vehicles. It's where you go when you need to obtain or renew your horse riding scroll. The lines there are out of this world. The point is, there's a lot of towers all around. Dozens of them, and each populated by a different lord, his family and servants. Since your ship will need extensive repairs, and all you could muster checking your pockets for money were a broken piece of a chopstick, couple of buttons and a rusty old bottle cap, you decide to find a job to earn some money while you wait for the ship to be fixed. The mayor of the port town asks you to go to Lord Bunny's tower, request audience with him and see what's what, cause no one heard from him in a pretty long while. Naturally, you agree and head off. As you enter the old structure though, the doorway behind you collapses, trapping you inside. This is where you pick one of 4 uniquely skilled adventurers to play as, and head off to find the Lord, as you can't really go back now, can you? The tower is 15 levels strong and filled with various enemies and treasures/items to find and use. Magic is casted using spell incarnations learned from scrolls and by combining syllables. Combat plays out in real time and is nothing special really, at least when comparing it to giants of the genre. Environmental puzzling is pretty common too, and may prove to be enjoyable if you're a fan of the mechanic. Towers, even if simple, is fun if you like RPGs, so don't sleep on it. Truck Attack is a futuristic 3D racing game with few interesting and unique for its changes to the genre classics. The most unique of them all being the so-called dynamic track system, and it's basically an interactive and dynamically changing tracks. So, you'll be able to drive over various features like switchers for instance that can open doors on a track, create ramps, blockades, bang the corners or even enable traps for those trailing behind you. So whomever is following you, trying to overtake you, may suddenly have a track for him changed, dramatically at that, and filled with hazards. These switches can also open shortcuts for you so they can cause both positive and negative impact on all of the racers. You think that's it? Nah, not even close. Even the track surfaces can be changed on the fly. So driving on a tarmac may quickly evolve into water, sand, snow or even oil. All that put together makes up for an incredibly fun racing experience. And when you give all the 39 included circuits plenty enough time to learn them and what each of the DTS does, Truck Attack will also feel really rewarding. And not only because you'll be winning races, but also because you'll be able to decide their outcome on a moment's notice and choosing the best way you want to approach them on your own. Truck Attack is an arcade racer, it doesn't claim to be anything else, and why would it, when it's so fun and well put together? Sure, presentation is perhaps nothing to boast about, even if not off-putting, but the gameplay more than makes up for it. Also, despite not being a simulation, Truck Attack's damage model and physics engine are rather good, and it's a pleasure to watch the cars in motion. So, if you enjoy action-packed and always surprising racing, there's hardly any better for those. Definitely not in today's video. Treasure Trap is an isometric action-adventure game conceptually similar to older Head Over Heels, but not in an abstract unknown setting. Oh, no. You know exactly where you are in Treasure Trap. You're a treasure hunting deep diver exploring the long-sunk ship, trying to uncover any and all of its riches and grab them for yourself. The wreck is composed out of over 100 rooms connected to each other through series of doors. So yeah, the idea behind it all is as simple as most 8-bit games were, to find all the gold and escape unscathed. Naturally, if you were to just dive and grab things that you find and leave, the game would not only be easy, but also boring. So, the sea life is everywhere, populating each and every room, and naturally, they're all deadly. The best way to deal with them is to avoid them, as you have no weapons. And only a very limited use of a super special piranha, a trained extra deadly one that swims around the entire room killing everything in it. Well, everything but you. It should be used only as the last means of escape or survival though. You start with only 2 of these, and each new is rewarded at 80 collected gold pieces. So not very often. If that wasn't enough, not all rooms are instantly accessible, so you'll need to find and collect geometrically shaped keys too, for the appropriate to them shaped doors. These are often in oddest of places that may require quite a lot of puzzling, so pushing crates, creating makeshift staircases and passages to get to them. Additionally, you're underwater. I mean, you knew that you were, and I may be just stating the obvious, but oxygen tanks are not infinite and constantly running out of that precious for survival gas. Fortunately, compressed air tanks are scattered around the wreck and you can use them to refill your scuba gear. So make sure to always do it when you come across them, even if you think that you won't need them. Treasure Trap is surprisingly fun, so if you like those exploration adventure titles of yore and have some fun memories with tons of 8-bit games in the same arcade adventuring subgenre, you'll love it. Who knows what that was? Come on, do you? Let me know in the comments below. Released simultaneously in the arcades on PC and NES in 1990, Trog is a unique, fun and surprisingly addictive arcade game. And for the most part, it could be described to be the new take on the Pac-Man formula, to the point of it being only a little more than a reskin. So, if you ever played Pac-Man, you'll know straight away how to play Trog when you get your paws on it. Anyway, in the prehistoric land of Og, one-eyed cavemen Trog live alongside dinosaurs in peace and friendship. No, scratch that, of course they don't, cause if they did we wouldn't have a game, especially not one like Pac-Man. So, the Cyclopean Trog love eggs. I mean, who doesn't? Poached, fried, scrambled and served in 100 or more other ways, they're yummy. But Trog especially enjoy big dinosaur eggs. So, you, or better yet, you and a friend of yours have to collect all of the eggs on each of the single screen stages playing as dinos to save them from the Trog and to progress further. These pesky cavemen, however, will stop at nothing to try to chase you down and catch you. They'll even resort to using Geneva Convention unfriendly different traps, fire and a stone wheel for instance, all to stop you. You're not just a dino running away for your life, however, and you have an arsenal of power-ups too. Well, arsenal may be a bit misleading, but there are pickups that can help you. So stuff like a pineapple that temporarily turns you into a T-Rex and in that form you can munch on these cavemen same way you do on your eggs, or hot tamale that lets you breathe fire. This may not seem like a lot, but you're you, so you will definitely make best use of them. Given how caveman traps work in the game and how enemies and you move, levels in Trog are less maze-like when compared to Pac-Man and more open, allowing you to react quickly to changes on the playing field and offering action-packed, frantic and exciting gameplay. If you're alone, Trog is fun, but if you have someone else there with you, it's fantastic. Same as Trog, Trojan is a port from the arcades, and it's a horizontally not scrolling but screen flicking arcade side view run and slasher, as in not shooter but sword wielding slash and jabber. Think arcade Robocop but played in like 10 times the speed and without scrolling. Oh my god, I must have reimagined like at least a dozen genres here all at once, no less. It's probably best that you just watch the footage to figure out what it's all about, cause I'm clearly not making the best job out of explaining it. So, in the far-off post-apocalypse future, somehow one person's ruling the world. And it's an evil world, Achilles and his army of henchmen. Though after you've done with him, he'll be Achilles no more, he'll be Achilles. Oh, cringe. How did he manage to do so all alone? I don't know, and frankly I don't care, but he needs to be stopped. Anyway, you're Ryu. Yep, like in Street Fighter 2, though less cool and well off enough to afford shoes. On a side note, I wonder even today how did Ryu manage to fight in so many places around the world, never having shoes on. I mean, there were broken bottles in China, screws, bolts and various debris where Guile was stationed, and in general, other than Balrog's ring, wherever the fights took place, the location was always full of rusty nails, sharp stones and other potentially dangerous or painful to step on trash, like loose Lego bricks and such. Still, that Ryu aside, our today's Ryu is a sword and shield wielding badass who decided to take it upon himself to remove Achilles from his pedestal and bring peace to the world, preferably before dinner. So, suspend your disbelief for a second and let's assume that somehow, not only Ryu knew where Achilles was, but it was also close enough for him to get there on foot, okay? Good. So, you'll be cutting through hundreds if not thousands of enemy goons over 6 levels, each of these including 2 bosses, one in the middle and one at the end. And while the regular enemy fodder is nothing too demanding, these bosses will put your skills to the test. Cause not only you have to slash them plenty enough times to put them down, but you also have to master the use of the shield to block their attacks. Cause Trojan is not a game that you can complete by avoiding enemy attacks alone. It's just not feasible. And the sooner it becomes the second nature for you to block, the better. Heck, I'd risk saying that you win a game of Trojan by blocking and not by attacking. Though, that's as incorrect and stupid as it sounds. Oh well, let's carry on. The presentation of Trojan, as you can see and hear, is terrible. No reason to dance around it, it just is. I suppose that's down to what PCs were capable at the time, and it wasn't a lot, because the arcade original was rather nice looking, at least for 1986. Gameplay is definitely Trojan's strongest suit, cause it allows for otherwise rather basic game to raise above limited EGA palette and PC speaker sounds, and actually let you have fun. So, keeping it all in mind, the release date and fact that it was one of the first games to build its idea around the shield and not the weapon, I'd say, give it a go, it's worth it. The season is over, the main run of the series too, and while I will keep releasing Obscure DOS Games videos, they won't be out as often as they will require much more research. In the meantime, I'll have other DOS related series running, So no worries, we're definitely nowhere near done.